I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so many to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, there's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning to you and happy Friday. Or is it a happy Friday? Let's dig into the news stories and try and find out. And most of it looks like it's a pretty dismal Friday. I mean, this Chagos surrender, doesn't it just make your blood boil? I don't care how much they try and spin this, how much they try and deflect from their responsibility, how much they're saying this is a great deal, it's not that much money, actually we're more secure than we were before. We didn't have to do it. I'm pretty certain we did not have to go through with this absolute nonsense. We're going to be discussing that a bit later. We're also going to be talking about the fact that Angela Rayner wants to get rid of child benefit for middle-class families. That is where someone's top salary, one of the parents, has a salary of $50,000 or more. And she thinks they don't deserve it. Is that right? Do you think that is true? Does that involve you? Are you worried about losing that benefit? And yet again, Labour's meddling around, aren't they, with prison sentences, more rapists, more murderers, more killers, all to be released early in their brand new master plan because the prisons are full to bursting. I'm pleased to say I am joined now by the wonderful James Price, former Conservative government minister. I'm also going to make an apology before we continue that if you see me constantly messing with my head, it's because my usual earpiece has decided to kick the bucket this morning. So I've got something which I don't really understand how this is supposed to fit in the ear. I might have to just sort of, like, I don't know, sit like this for the next 3 hours unless I can staple it to the side of my skull. Right, good morning to you, James Price.
I hope that I'll be less of a headache for you than the earpiece or the Jake.
Honestly, you wonder who makes these things and whose skull they actually fit. It's like, honestly, literally, in this job, you're there messing about with bits of wires and technology, and you've got a countdown going on, and there's panic stations, and then you think, great, what a fantastic way to kick off the show. And what an equally positive way to kick off the show, talking about this ridiculous Chagos surrender. The more I read into this, the more confused I really am about all of this, because I'm pretty certain we just didn't have to do it.
We didn't have to do it. And the thing that really upsets me about this is the fact that the Prime Minister is lying to the British people. All of his cronies are lying to the British people. They're lying to you. They're taking you for fools. They don't care about you or any of your life quality getting better at all. They care about, and it sounds like a cliche, they care about their fancy North London dinner parties and things like that. But more than that, they care about their, quote, international reputation. All of this comes from the fact that various diplomats and British lawyers and people like that have been made to feel a little bit embarrassed at certain international conferences now, because Mauritius has for a long time been lobbying for these islands that they've never owned themselves before, that are thousands of miles away from them, but they think they can jump on this kind of decolonization empire terrible bandwagon, isn't the West evil, in order to get something out of it. And these international tribunals are now staffed by people, appointed by people, by President Putin of Russia and President Xi of China. And we are listening to these people because Keir Starmer cares more about international law than he does care about the interests of the British people. And I'd want to ask him, is this international law here in the room with us right now? Because it's getting to the point that I think he should be put into a straitjacket.
I mean, what is absolutely mad is when you actually read the original ICJ ruling, which of course had that judge sitting on the board making this decision that we had to give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, which is gazillions of miles away, has nothing to do with those islands. When you read that initial ruling, which is legally non-binding as well, it is a madness. It uses language such as decolonisation. It is just an absolute jumble of wokery. And I just don't understand, either with this government or the previous government, who said, well, we wouldn't have done this, we wouldn't have struck that deal, we wouldn't have done it in quite the same way. Well, they equally didn't tell the ICJ to bog off. Why not?
Well, for a while they did. The person I would back on this, and I can quote him directly, would be Dominic Cummings, who's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but he says this Chagos swear word came to my desk in number 10. It's all total swear word from a few government lawyers. MI6 knows it, GCHQ knows it, the MOD knows it. Everyone knows this is just far left international law swear word. Right, so this is the truth of it. And when Cummings was there, because he had the courage and the fortitude to actually stand up to these people and say you're talking complete swear word, it all stopped. And it was, I'm afraid, slightly weak ministers falling for this kind of stuff again, who maybe got into posts after Cummings left, and there wasn't the bulwark of someone sensible and brave like him in post. I think it's worth explaining that there are only a very small number of political appointments in the British system. I would say far too few. But when Starmer came in last year, 100 ministers changed jobs, 100 Tories left, 100 Labour joined, and then 100 advisors as well. Everybody else, all exactly the same people. All the same people in the Foreign Office, all the same people across the bits of the deep state, in the diplomatic service, all the people who are saying that international law is very, very important. And it's why I think this is a fairly illegitimate decision, even though Starmer won the election.
What happens if you break international law? I mean, it's not even legally binding, so I don't know how you break something that is simply advisory. But even if it was legally binding, what happens if you break it? Do you go to international law prison?
We're going to start seeing arrest warrants put out for David Lammy. I mean, it's ludicrous, this sort of stuff, right? You know, we fund these organisations, including the United Nations and all these other things, much more than most other countries do, between us and the United States and maybe a few others. And yet they have been completely taken over by the Chinese and by the Russians to advance their own international ends against that of Britain and America. And I think it's time that we start wising up to this. These things are complete bunkum, and they have been completely, I think, delegitimised from when they started. Like the ECHR is another example of this, right?
Do you ever think, actually, I mean, Sir Keir Starmer's obsession with going back into the EU, Ed Miliband's obsession with net zero and destroying the country's economy, because basically high energy costs are the roots of all evil in this nation, their obsession with going to Beijing every 5 seconds, what is it with these people? I mean, do they actively hate Britain? Are they actually working at the behest of the Communist Party in China? I cannot make head nor tail of some of their decision making.
I almost hope that they are shady agents at Beijing, because the alternative, which I think is the truth, is that they're just morons who are not up to the job of governing this once great country. They're not up to the job of being able to stand up to this enormous blob of civil servant bureaucrats who have actually been running the country for a long time. They don't have the fortitude, again, as I said, of someone like Dominic Cummings, who would just say no to stuff that was obviously nonsense. And I hope that whatever party comes and succeeds Labour, because these lot need to be turfed out as quickly as possible, understand the scale of the blob that they're going to be fighting against. Does Nigel Farage have a plan for cutting away all of these sorts of people? Does Kemi Badenoch? Because that is what needs to happen. And if they come into office without a plan like that, Alex, they're going to be completely snookered as well.
Yeah, I hear this from time and again. I hear this. People like past Prime Minister Liz Truss will say, you've got no idea what it's like to be in that position, how much they scupper you, how little they actually let you do. Let's talk now about Rayner urging Angela Reeves, who's that? Rachel Reeves, to get rid of child benefit for middle-class families, basically. If the highest earner's salary is between 50,000 and 80,000, why on earth can't you pay for your own kids? I mean, on the surface of it, we're cash-strapped, we're broke, got to cut some money here or there. But the unfairness again of going after the people who pay into the economy, who prop the economy up with their taxes, because if you're earning over between 50 and 80,000 pounds, you're probably contributing a decent amount. Taking constantly from those people and redistributing that money, particularly to people who've come into the country yesterday, it's appalling.
Yeah, do you know what? I actually don't know how much someone on 50 to 80,000 is a net contributor or not, because the state now spends so much money and so much of it gets wasted and swirled about and lost. But if you said to someone in America that £50,000 a year to £80,000 a year was a high salary, they would laugh at you. The part of the problem is we've not had proper wage growth for a long time, or just growth in the economy in general. This week the economy grew 0.7%, and people are cheering like they've won the UEFA Cup there last night, right? This is crazy talk. But we are a poor country because of policies that this government, and I'm afraid previous ones as well, have put in. And so if we got growth going, we wouldn't need to have this conversation. But I think the other part of it is the extremely stupid way that we tax people huge amounts of money and swill it around inside the centre of the system and send it back again and it's worth a lot less. Why don't we tax people less, spend less, get the economy growing, and then we wouldn't have to worry about any of this stuff. But all of that, of course, is absolutely anathema to the socialist mindset, and it's why the socialist mindset inside government is killing our country.
Well, good news today. Ofgem's lowering the energy price cap to 1,720 from July. We're still going to have some of the highest energy prices in the world. This has nothing to do with Ed Zero and his madcap climate plans. This is basically just to do with the lowering cost of gas, which goes up and down like a yo-yo on a string, depending on what OPEC feel like doing from one day to the next. Why don't they get it that actually energy costs are at the root of everything, right? If energy bills were less, there'd be more money for the NHS to spend on treatment. In fact, all public services would work better. If energy costs were less, that would be great for business. We could have manufacturing. If energy costs were less, maybe companies could pay higher wages, which means that if energy costs were less, they wouldn't have to bring in migrants as cheap foreign labour. If energy costs were less, guess what? People wouldn't be facing a cost of living crisis. If energy costs were less, people would be far happier in this country. And they do nothing about this. You've got Ed Miliband on his berserk Hercules little journey around all the windwarm lands of the United Kingdom with his ukulele, buying all this rubbish from China while they're using slaves and are frankly sitting there thinking, hoo-ha, I'm going to undermine the system. And we've had warnings again. Sir Richard Dearlove today writing in The Independent saying if we allow China to take any part in our energy grid, they're going to be able to put these kill switches in things like solar panels. I mean, dear Lord, they found them over in America to mess about with the grid, to turn the lights off if they want to. I mean, this government are just, they're either useless or treacherous.
Yeah, maybe the toxic combination of both, right? Unfortunately, the Treasury only ever supplies the amount of money it thinks that we can afford to face these sorts of threats from China, not the amount of threat that we actually do face. And as a result, you end up with the accountants saying, no, we've just got to go in with China. It's actually really good and fine and all the rest of it. And Ed Net Zero Brain Cells Miliband just goes along with this. What have we got as the crown jewel of the defence system is the Trident nuclear submarines, right? So we've managed to fit a nuclear reactor onto a tiny submarine, a stealth submarine, no less. Well, if we've got the technology to do that, why can't we put one in every town? Why can't we put one dotted all the way along the coast in secure venues? Then we would have unlimited clean energy produced by Rolls-Royce, who can actually start making these, what they call small modular reactors. We wouldn't need to worry about using farmland in the same way for solar panels. We wouldn't need to worry about being beholden to the Chinese for wind turbines. We wouldn't even need to worry about fracking, although I do think we should get fracking going because it's the main driver of American energy costs being less than half the cost of ours. So we've got technologies here to do it, but you've got green morons from the Green Party saying nuclear bad, when it's not. And how's that worked out for Germany? They shut their nuclear power stations. They're opening new coal power stations. And they were taking the rest of their energy from Russia, which meant they couldn't be strong on the war in Ukraine. We are completely mad if we don't think this is an existential emergency for our country.
Well, and we've even got, so when it comes to all the wacky net zero stuff and all the other woke stuff that the Labour Party seem to lap up enthusiastically, we've even had a report out about 4 days ago from the government's own sort of terrorism czar saying that he's worried, this is Jonathan Hall KC, speaking at RUSI, the Royal United Service Institute, saying that actually a lot of the nonsense that has become so trendy amongst the political elite, net zero, trans rights, all of this stuff, is essentially being pumped out, spoon-fed deliberately by hostile governments to destabilise the country. He says, basically, they want to make sure we've got the highest energy prices in the world and a collapsed economy. They want to make sure we're constantly fighting with ourselves and the citizens fall out with their own government and democratic procedures. And yet this government just goes along with a lot of it. At what point is a security briefing from Five Eyes or MI6 going to cross the desk of Sir Keir Starmer that he's going to take seriously?
You're absolutely right. For people watching our live stream just now, I think I turned into the nodding dog Churchill from the adverts because I'm agreeing so violently with you on this. You're completely right. For anyone at home who's got TikTok, just know that Xi Jinping knows everything about you through your mobile phone. And if your children are watching stuff on TikTok, you've got no idea what it is they're watching. It is a Chinese super weapon aimed at the vulnerable bits of your children's brains. And people that watch it for too long come away with a positive view about the Chinese Communist Party. I wonder why that would be. TikTok in the West is like crack cocaine, but what the stuff they watch in it in China is just like spinach. It is a tool of control and disinformation and propaganda, and it should be banned here. It should be banned in America, which it was going to be until Trump stopped it happening, a bad thing that he has done. And we should be very, very serious about the fact that our children and the rest of us are being played with by troll farms in Russia, in China, and in Iran. And we need to get wise to this, start believing our own eyes and ears, and believing the greatness and great history of our country rather than the evil drivel that we get fed to us from these sorts of organisations and the useful idiots on the left in places like The Guardian and The Mirror and all these sorts of places that will tell you that what the Chinese are saying is right. It's not.
Oh, James, I couldn't agree more. Oh, what a world we live in, eh? Thank you ever so much for your company. Lots of messages have been coming in this morning. Lots of calls already stacked up. So we're going to hit up the phone lines after the break. Now, the number to dial if you want to get involved is 0344 499 1000. It is charged at your normal network rate. So basically, don't cost you anything. 8722 is the number to text me. If you're going to use that route, you've got to write the word talk before your smuzz. That way, it doesn't get intercepted by the Chinese Communist Party and stored in some data bank over in Xinjiang. It comes into this little command system in front of me instead. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that other phone number, 03444991000, or leave me a voice note if you like. It's a nice, clean and succinct way of doing it. That way saves your thumbs, doesn't it? I can just press play and listen to what you have to say. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back to take your calls after this.
At so many different levels, with the EU, with the Chagos deal, with mass immigration, this country has been opened up and been essentially violated by successive governments. And when you see people, accusing people of gravitating towards the right, voting reform, the government is effectively radicalising the British people. And if there wasn't a party like Reform for that outlet of resentment and rage and anger to be put into a democratic, peaceful avenue, if that wasn't there, I really worry about the state of affairs.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show, and it is time for your messages and your calls. Let's hit up some messages first of all. Jane says this communist government have basically sold them to China, sold everything to China. I mean, we are a vassal state at the moment of Beijing. What about the people who live there? And this is the Chagos Islands. Imagine one day you're British and the next day you're Malaysian. Your nationality and domicile has been sold from underneath you. Surely that's not legal. Well, the thing is, we kind of booted out everyone who once lived there. But there have been protests being organised around the country of people who now live over here, Chagosians, saying, what are you doing? Why are you suddenly giving our islands to Mauritius? Alex, we as the British public own British sovereign land, not our government. Good point, well made. Why are we not being told the reason that it's better for national security for us to rent the base on the islands owned by a third party over us owning a base on the islands that we own outright? That's Andy from Thatcham. That's what I keep trying to question when they say this is a good deal, we've managed to get full security, we've got all these nautical miles around those islands. No, part of this deal says we have to tell Mauritius if there's going to be any military activity coming off those islands. Why? Why do we have to inform Mauritius of that? Mauritius is about 2,000 to 3,000 miles away. It's not like that's going to affect their airspace. And what are they going to do? If we're like, oh, bring, oh, hi, Mauritius. Yeah, it's Britain. Just to let you know, our top secret operation where we're going to be flying military jets off the Chagos Islands to surprise our enemies is about to take place at 0200 hours. Please don't tell Beijing. I mean, for God's sakes. Right, let's go on the phone lines now. This is David in Exeter. Hi, David.
Hi, Alex. Well, national security. Let's get into that. What national security?
But exactly.
It's an illusion, Alex. Now, when Starmer and all these people like Blair and co say, you know, our or we in terms of national security, they mean the EU. They don't mean the UK. Now, where this particular Chagos thing, and there are other significant issues at the minute, energy security, food security, you know, we could keep going, border security. These are all questions for Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor. Now, as you well, and you, a lot of the listeners will know, he's obviously Tony Blair's second in charge. Now, he's now currently National Security Advisor, and this is the story. He is currently, or the government is currently, refusing for Jonathan Powell to go before Parliamentary Select Committee and answer questions on any of these issues.
It's so weird and creepy, isn't it? Like I said, it just... To try and make sense of it all, you are tempted to start thinking that this government cares more about Chinese policy than they do our own. The amount of money that we're giving them for net zero, destabilising our own economy, pushing up our own energy bills, much to the glee of China. They want to go and sign a big old trading relationship with China. Fantastic. That's great, isn't it? Meanwhile, they're giving them the Chagos Islands. I don't understand this government. Are they useless or are they traitors?
I think they're floundering like, you know, it's probably wrong to call it a government. They're floundering like a fish out of water, but under the circumstances with war in Europe. Now, you want to get into some serious questions. Let's get into the serious question then of what is the destination of this defence pact that Starmer's just signed with Ursula von der Leyen? Where's that going? Because he's calling it a pact, Alice, and von der Leyen is calling it Defence and Security Union. Just a second. That's literally... She's already stated in terms what she wants. That's all on the table. She wants single point command and control of all defence and security services in the EU zone and one single EU-appointed defence contractor. Now, where's Starmer going with what he's doing then?
It's mad. Look, I agree with you. I mean, thankfully, so far in the ridiculous deal that wasn't a deal because we didn't get anything in return that Starmer signed with the EU in this first step, because that's all it is. This is just a first step, this deal. That's right. This is where we've got to on year one. By the time we get to, you know, year 5 of a Starmer government, I'll have to pack my bags, move back to Brussels and go through all of that horror story again. But you're absolutely right on this, because so far in this pact, we've avoided the worst of it. We've got little exemptions here and there, and we're selling our weapons, or we're paying them to sell them weapons they really need. Make that make sense. But we haven't gone sort of full scale down the line of total cooperation in all of their dastardly plans, but that's because they haven't presented them to us yet. We know that Ursula von der Leyen has rewritten what the defence treaty is going to look like, and things like PESCO, and actually it goes much further than Michel Barnier's 2018 version of that script. And I have no doubt, as I'm sure you don't either, David, that this idiot, facile, useless, feckless, unpatriotic Prime Minister is just going to sign us up to the lot of it, because that man doesn't have the word no in his vocabulary.
Well, Maggie Thatcher had the word no. She told Jacques Delors in 1984 no when he asked her for defence union. Well, of course, Tony Blair said yes, Cameron said yes, hid it in plain view, and now Starmer has initiated the unification process formally. There will be bigger bills. There will be more and ever closer union in defence and security, and we will end up, and this is the risk, and Sir Richard Dearlove has called this out, ex-head of MI6. He's called it out at committee. You can't be in one bit, not be in all of it. And their ambitions, Alex, are everything in this area.
It's amazing how many people from the intelligence sector have warned time and again that this will undermine NATO. It will drag us into interventions that might not have anything to do with us, that we don't want, and tie our hands when we might want to do something that they don't allow. David from Exeter, thank you ever so much. Let's now speak to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Hi there, Mark.
Hi there, Alex. Great show, hon. Yeah, I mean, basically the Chagos thing, and then I want to quickly throw you a left ball. Basically, the Chagos thing, to me, sounds very much like somebody has something on someone somewhere, because it doesn't make any sense. You know, these are displaced people. They're non-white. They're very much in a minority. You know, these are the very people that the Progressive Labour Party who do with so many other people, Palestinians and, you name the group, they'll support them and they'll champion their cause and all the rest of it. Yet these people they don't care about, all on the basis of some arbitrary, non-binding ruling. So to me, something's very fishy about it. And then completely left field for you, Alex. Tap into your Christian bit. What's been going on, the government's turned against Israel, the sanctions and all this kind of thing.
Right.
I was just really interested because, you're pretty much one of the only outspoken Christians on the station. What you thought about the biblical references to all that kind of stuff. What I drew reference to was Zechariah 12:3. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it.
Yeah.
Talking about the nations rising against Israel. Being as in Revelation.
I mean, before we get deep down into the Bible, which I love to do in my spare time, I'm not sure how much of the audience we're going to be taking with us on this one, if I'm honest with you, Mark, as much as I like to evangelise. But to sort of sum up what you're saying is there are some very eerie echoes of what the Bible foretells and what the Bible says with what is going on in the Middle East, what has been going on for a long time in the Middle East, and I'm sure many Christians around the world are looking at that situation with hairs standing up on the back of their neck. Thank you ever so much to Mark in Lincolnshire. Someone's written, Howard in Suffolk, it'd be easier to stomach if Starmer just gave the Chagos Islands directly to China. That way everyone will see where his loyalty is and save us having to pay anything to give it away. I mean, the other mad thing about this is how weak our government is. Everyone kind of hopes that at the last minute Donald Trump would stride in and go, nope, this is a bad deal, rip it up. Do the job of protecting our country because Sir Keir Starmer won't. But of course, what Sir Keir Starmer did is he went to America and said, don't you worry, we've got this. Your military base is fine because we're going to be paying a lot of money to make sure it is. So America's like, all right, nothing to see here then, no problem. Is there anything that man won't give away to another country? I mean, tie up your granny tonight. Starmer's probably going to post her to Xinjiang. Right, we're going to take a short break now. And when I come back, we're going to be talking more about this Chagos deal with Robert Midgley, who is the head of communications of the Friends of the British Overseas Territories, who were part of trying to get that last-minute court injunction at the 11th hour to see if they could delay this process and at least have Parliament debate it and vote on it and stop it going through. Let's see what he has to think about this great betrayal after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. I mean, I've been ranting about this all morning because honestly, sometimes, when you don't like a government's policy, you're like, well, I wouldn't have done it that way because your ideology sucks, quite frankly, which is, the way I feel about most left-wingery. But then there's other stuff, and you just go, who of any colour rosette thinks this is appropriate? I mean, what sort of lobotomy do you have to have had to not just give away critically important islands, that is your islands, your territory, to another country who's got a really close relationship with a hostile state, but then pay them to take them? Let's speak to Robert Midgley, Head of Communications, Friends of the British Overseas Territories. Robert, is there any way, shape or form that you can help me make sense of this? Because my understanding is this ICJ ruling was non-binding, so we probably could have just ignored it. It was sort of written in the words of wokery. There was even a Chinese judge sitting on that committee who was a big fan of Russia invading Ukraine. And we've just gone, all right, here you go. We better do what it says then, even though it was just advice. And then we've ended up paying an arm and a leg, you know, up to £30 billion. I think that will probably swell to much higher than that. And even in this deal, there's a clause in it that says we've got to notify Mauritius if we're doing any sort of military things coming from the islands. It's like, but that's the point of having really critically secure infrastructure and a military base in the middle of the ocean. So you're not telling anybody what you're up to.
Look, Alex, you've just summed it up really well there. And, you know, I think it's the definition of insanity. The whole deal is absolutely insane. You know, Diego Garcia is a guarantor of Western security. And now we have to go to a third country that's, over 3,000 kilometers away, just to ask them if we can take a plane up into the air. It's absolutely insane. But I mean, yesterday what we saw was a real sort of David and Goliath moment. You had one Chagossian standing up in the High Court, delaying the whole thing based on human rights grounds. I mean, for the past year or so, you know, Chagossians have been sidelined, they've been ignored, they've had all these pointless, meaningful conversations with the government where notes weren't even taken or implemented in the deal. But most of the Chagossians are firmly on the side of it remaining British. And, you know, the government have ignored them to the point, and actually they've snuck up on them in the last moment and delayed the whole thing, which was absolutely phenomenal to be in. I was really, really pleased to be out there with them yesterday, to stand alongside and make sure they get the media attention that they deserve. They absolutely deserve to be heard and just recognised for who they are. They are British Chagossians who want, you know, the Chagos Islands to remain British. They want to go back there into the outer islands. They understand the security concerns. And, you know, much like in Cyprus with Akrotiri and Deucalion, Ascension Island, they've got civilian populations that live on side by side with military installations. Same with Gibraltar, same with Falkland Islands. You know, they've made it work. And I should say that back in 2012, there was a KPMG feasibility survey that was done on the Chagos Islands, and they created 5 options that looked at bringing Chagossians back into the outer islands. And it worked. You know, the UK would have to take a lot of responsibility and put some money into it, but it's a hell of a lot less of money that we're about to spend now. And, you know, they should have done that. I don't know what happened to that feasibility study. It just faded away, but it made absolute sense. And why we didn't go through that is beyond any recognition, because we've essentially turned our backs on self-determination. Yeah. Yesterday, you know, turning our back on self-determination, you saw that single Chagossian get absolutely shot down in the courts. And then at the same time, you had places like Gibraltar and the Falklands, you know, standing up and be like, what the hell is going on here?
Right, is it going to be us next? I've got to ask you something. You used to work in the Foreign Office, didn't you, Robert? So I hope you might be well placed to answer this. I got 2 questions. Number one is, once this is done, and it basically is done, it's stitched up now, can it ever be reversed? I'm guessing it can't. And number 2, and I always ask this of people because I just don't know the answer, even though this wasn't actually a binding piece of international law, even if it was, like, what happens when you break international law? I mean, what actually happens if you go, nah, we're not going to do that?
Okay, so there's 2 things there. Firstly, once the deal is signed, it's very hard to reverse because that's essentially made it binding. Secondly, that, you know, it's you can't go back onto it. And if we ignored it, the thing was, the ICJ, the original ruling, the ICJ shouldn't be making sovereignty rulings anyway. Not to mention, they can't do anything binding between 2 Commonwealth nations. It's actually a restriction with the ICJ that they just can't make you know, 2 Commonwealth nations do a sovereignty agreement with each other. So we could have completely ignored that if there's just never any need for us to go into detail. And what I should say is that there's something that's happened behind the scenes that's made the US say, yes, we need to do this.
Yeah, what is that?
What has been said? No one has been questioning what has been said, but it's so essential that even the US turned around and said, we need to do that. And I saw Keir Starmer's press conference yesterday, and he said there's something at critical national, you know, secret and policy. Well, what is it then? because you're giving away all this money, you're giving away sovereignty, you're turning back on self-determination. So what is this essential piece of information? Because I've seen all the essential pieces of information, and nothing in these texts tell me that we should be giving away our own territory at cost. It just doesn't make sense.
I've never understood why the Americans kind of caved to this, because I mean, surely it's not in your interest unless they kind of think that actually the Chagos Islands being given to Mauritius and sort of coaxing the Chinese in to start sniffing around actually helps us sniff around in reverse or something.
Alex,
I can't make sense of it.
We've been accused now of being aligned with Russia and China.
Right.
Russia and China, being no doubt, do not want this to go ahead. They've been putting spy software in fishing trawlers docking up in Diego Garcia for God knows how long. The FCDO have been keeping it all quiet. They've been bugging these negotiations. You found the previous Prime Minister of Mauritius with bags of cash and UK visas. This serious dodgy stuff that's been going on. And like you said earlier, the UN has been filled with Chinese lawyers and Chinese diplomats. The whole thing has stank from the off. And not to mention that Keir Starmer had his own trip to Mauritius paid for by the Mauritian government to convince him to hand it over before he became Prime Minister. The whole thing, Alex, absolutely stinks. And then for them to turn around to us, who want to protect British sovereignty, and say, actually, no, you're in league with Russia and China, along with the Chagosians. You know how offended we are, and the Chagosians feel betrayed by all of this for wanting to protect British interests.
Do you know, that was like boom, 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 truth bombs all over the place. I just need to like process this in my head. So these talks were all infiltrated, being bugged, being twisted by China and Russia. And then...
May I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
So just on the run-up to the Mauritian election, they shut down social media for a few weeks because people were talking about these leaks, because all these damaging things were coming out from the Prime Minister's office, not just about Chagos negotiations, but about more sensitive things. And what Mauritius did was shut down all of their social media for a few weeks. What sort of free-speaking society is this that we've dealt with? Not to mention, they've been locking up British Chagosians for speaking out about it in Mauritius too. They've been fleeing Mauritius to come here for safety.
That is absolutely crazy. And why is nobody talking about the point you just made, which I didn't even know about? That Stalin, sorry, I always do that, old Sir Keir Stalin, I can't help it, slip of the tongue, had an all-expenses-paid trip to Mauritius before he became Prime Minister. I mean, that is really, really dodgy.
The whole thing absolutely stinks. I mean, putting aside that his best friends were the lawyers, you know, being paid up by Mauritius to start with, the whole thing absolutely has stank from the off. And, you know, it's just continues to get worse. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the documents, but it talks about decolonisation. It smells of, you know, imperial guilt. You know, Mauritius has never owned or held sovereignty over the Chagos Islands.
It's not even close to them. That's what I don't get. It's not even in the same ballpark.
Just to rewind, we actually got the Chagos Islands as a reward from the Battle of Waterloo. You know, when Napoleon was defeated under the Treaty of Paris, we were ceded the Chagos Islands, and then Mauritius came afterwards 2 years later.
Oh, do you know, Robert, thank you so much for everything that you have done to bring that 11th hour legal injunction, helping the Chagosians speak up for themselves, and the protests that you guys have helped them to organise. It's a crying shame we didn't get a longer delay, so at least we could try and have some sort of democratic chat about it all. But, oh my gosh, some of the bits of information Robert just dropped then, that stuff should be the front of every single newspaper in the land. Sounds like this is more crooked than a witch's cane. Right, we're going to take a short break now, and something else that makes my blood boil is the way that our ridiculous Prime Minister again is handing a win to Hamas by trying to encourage Netanyahu to have a ceasefire against those really horrible, bloodthirsty, demonic terrorists who'd like to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Slow clap again. We're going to be discussing that with Fleur Hassan Naoum, who's the Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy and the former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, after this.
at so many different levels, with the EU, with the Chagos deal, with mass immigration, this country has been opened up and been essentially violated by successive governments. And when you see people, accusing people of gravitating towards the right, voting reform, the government is effectively radicalising the British people. And if there wasn't a party like Reform for that outlet of resentment and rage and anger to be put into a democratic, peaceful avenue, if that wasn't there, I really worry about the state of affairs.
And some of the prison officers and staff, they were pretty much a bit shocked, and it kind of like hit home to Lucy as injustice here, because I think, like, especially when the prison officers went, "Oh my God, Lucy, we thought you were sure to be going home now." Unless you remember back in hour, they're all running around all over the place trying to help Lucy out. The officers are, and the inmates, and even the governor. So it shocked all of them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, we're just discussing the ridiculous betrayal, the senselessness of giving away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, paying them to have it. What a breach of security that is. And again, another chapter in the book of how to mess up the West and ruin the world is the three weak-willed, wimpy, woke, another word beginning with W that Ofcom won't allow me to use, Macron, Starmer and Carney, all saying to Israel, "Oh, you should have a ceasefire. Just stop fighting Hamas. Go on. You've had your... It's a bit too much now, isn't it? I know you didn't start this war, but maybe you should just let it go." I mean, seriously? Seriously? You think that's going to help things? You think if there's like a ceasefire that Hamas are just going to go, "Yeah, that's nice. Let's go to, take up our time knitting or something. Let's do a bit of embroidery instead of planning how to wipe Israel off the face of the earth." Let's speak now to Fleur Hassan Naoum, who's Israeli Foreign Ministry Special Envoy. Fleur, great to have you back on the programme. Netanyahu has launched an absolutely blistering attack against the leaders of France, Canada, and of course here, the UK as well. Let's have a little listen to what he had to say.
I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. You won't be surprised to learn that Hamas thanked President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer and Carney for demanding that Israel end its war in Gaza immediately. Hamas was right to thank them, because by issuing their demand, replete with a threat of sanctions against Israel, not Hamas, these three leaders effectively said they want Hamas to remain in power. I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
That's all I have to say to that, because he is absolutely bang on, isn't he, Fleur?
Totally. I mean, honestly, when a terrorist group, a genocidal group that doesn't put its arms down, but is actually telling you to your face that they continue and they will continue to perform terrorist activities, they want to destroy your country, and not just your country, all the Jews around the world too. When they're thanking you, you really are on the wrong side of history. So Netanyahu's correct. More than that, they talk about a Palestinian state. What does that look like? And this is what leads me to believe that this is all performative, Alex, because they don't know what a Palestinian state would look like. They don't know if it's going to be another enclave of the Islamic Republic of Iran. What do they expect a Palestinian state to look like? Well, we've got 94% of the Palestinians in the West Bank already living under a Palestinian Authority rule that steals from their people, it's a kleptocracy, completely corrupt, That's what the Palestinian state looks like. And the other side of it is Hamas in Gaza. So exactly what they want to do, to me, if you ask me, Alex, it's performative and it's to abate their populations in their countries. These are left-wing governments that are talking. Starmer from Labour, Canada from their Labour, Liberal, whatever it is, and France, Macron. They're all leaders who have a big problem in their country of Islamic extremism. And instead of facing it straight on and admitting that the problem is theirs too, and connecting the dots to understand that it's the same Islamic extremism which attacked us on October 7th, it's the same one that is causing all the problems in the region and in Europe. Until they fess up to that, all they're going to be doing, like Churchill once said, is feeding the crocodile, hoping they will get eaten last.
Well, I completely agree with you. This absolute appeasement of a terrorist organisation who are barbaric, brutal, murderous, bestial things. I mean, they're not even humans, the members of Hamas. And to appease them like this, I think you're right. I think it is to quell communities here. We saw what happened in Washington the other day, the sick shooting of 2 Jews there. I think all of this is actually to try and prevent there being terror attacks on our own soil. And I mean, but the Islamists are using this. They won't prevent it.
They won't prevent it. You've already had in London a major terrorist attack. They've had one in Paris. We've had 9/11. I mean, how much more do they want to see? Do they want to see more dead people in the streets? I don't understand it.
I don't understand it either. And I tell you what, Flo, at the moment, I'm listening to Douglas Murray's latest book where he recounts with real survivors what happened in the kibbutz and the details of what happened at that music festival and the first-hand accounts. I mean, I honestly, I want to cry because there's some of the stuff that is detailed in that book. And the thing that got me the most, I haven't finished it yet, but the thing that got me the most is when the boundaries were broken and Hamas rushed in, the amount of civilians who came in afterwards cheering them on, trying to help, bludgeoning people with hammers. And you just think to yourself, Israel cannot survive with these people as next door neighbours ready to pounce at any moment. If they stop, Hamas will just rearm and they will get straight back on with it because they are bloodthirsty monsters. They don't care about the civilians in their own country. In fact, they want to see more of their own civilians die because that way they think they're winning the propaganda war around the West.
It's a strategy and it's working. And it's working. And this is exactly what I said to Channel 4 this week when they interviewed me. The strategy is working. The strategy is to use their own people, sacrifice their own people who they don't care about in the least because their ideology is more important to them than their own people. Using that to get the whole world to isolate Israel. That's what's happening. But thank God we've got some real friends in all of these countries who understand the mistake of their government. We really do. People who get it, people who are scared for their own societies and understand that we are facing a civilizational clash like we haven't seen since the 1930s with Nazism. Islamism, Islamic fundamentalism, political Islam are the Nazis of our era. And what are the leaders doing? Well, you know what, Alex? Very similar to what leaders were doing before Churchill actually put his hand on the leadership of the modern world. That's what it is.
Capitulating. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And what I don't understand is this. You know, we were happy to go and try and bomb the bejesus out of ISIS. Good.
Exactly.
We were happy to try and contain the Taliban. Good. But when it comes to Hamas, there's this grand old fear that you can't do anything, you can't touch them. Maybe they're actually freedom fighters instead. No, they're not. They're terrorists. And yet I've never seen any conflict or any war in the entirety of my life being reported with this ridiculous blow-by-blow account that we're getting out of Gaza. Oh, guess what? Something's happened to a hospital. It must have been Israel. Oh, guess what? This many children have died, according to Hamas. Wait, they're not doing that in Ukraine. They might be doing a big picture thing that, you know, this particular city's been under siege and this sort of territory might have been gained or lost. But they're not saying, well, the Russians today set off 85 drones and these children were dismembered. I mean, what is going on there? Why is the media so obsessed with trying to report on this blimmin' war, this disgusting, ugly war, like it's commentating on a sports match?
Well, I have some answers for that. I think that they've got their narrative. The mainstream media have got their narrative, and their narrative is all based on this woke rubbish of the oppressor and the oppressed. And even though Israel has tried to make peace with the Palestinians many times, even though Israel left Gaza in 2005, Israel is too successful to ever be the oppressed. So even though we were invaded on October 7th, they're acting like we invaded them. And that's the bottom line. It doesn't fit into that narrative. And if you ask me, Alex, the double standards and the demonization also has a splash of anti-Semitism in all of it.
Oh, no, I think it really does. I think it does because, you know, Jewish people and Israelis are not ever allowed to be the victims, are they?
Never.
They're always the evil perpetrators. But what I don't get about this is it seemed to me, this obviously came after the Abraham Accords, where everyone else in the region was pretty sick to death of Islamism, seeing how it tore apart their countries, decimated their economies, left people kicking around in the sand. They suddenly went, do you know what? We wouldn't mind westernising. That's where the money's at. That makes things better. Not that I'd trust half of them, quite frankly. But there was a moment here that the West could have got behind Israel and used it as an opportunity to completely smash Iran, who have been playing games and threatening global security for far too long without any reprisal. Instead, oh, let's get round the table. Let's do a deal with them, which they never stick to. This was a brilliant opportunity for the West to come together and say, right, once and for all, we're going to deal with this. And I actually think a lot of the neighbouring countries would have let us get on with it. Because I think they're fed up with this nonsense.
Well, absolutely. The United Arab Emirates kicked out their Muslim Brotherhood over 10 years ago. The Saudis, since 9/11, have been cleaning up their country from Islamic fundamentalism and have kicked out the Wahhabis in their country. Bahrain, the same. And not only that, the Emiratis warned Europe. They warned them. They said, you guys don't know what Islamic fundamentalism looks like. Let us tell you. Let us help you. But of course, this interferes with this multicultural, oh, let's accept everyone, even let's be tolerant of intolerance, which is what Europe has done. And as Douglas says, much better than me, it's suicide.
It is suicide, and I think we now live in fear of a minority of a minority population in our country who want to use this, you know, who want to politicise Islam, use it to destroy the West, who make no bones about their intentions, and we seem to be so afraid of them that we are capitulating to something that is very clearly acts of evil against an allied nation who have done so much to help us in the past, provided us with high-tech military cyber technology, who are there fighting, you know, a tiny little country, 10 times smaller than Iran, fighting everybody in their neighbourhood just to have the right to exist. And we're telling them to down their tools.
Because they're confused. They have confused themselves and they still don't know who the good guys are or the bad guys are, or just that they don't understand what war is. You know, the West, the allies were in Afghanistan fighting and Iraq and all these other places fighting ISIS for 10 years. There were also a lot of innocent civilians. Unfortunately, that is the cost of war. But we didn't start this war. This all lies on the feet of Hamas. And this is the playbook that they want. They don't care about sacrificing our people. This is what they live for. They live for these feckless leaders who have no idea what's really going on, who want to appease their own population. And this is how they win. This is how Hamas wins.
They've even stopped calling out Hamas for what they are, or telling Hamas to do anything. They're just like, we're just going to focus all our energy and attention on telling Israel what to do, other than paying, you know, mealy-mouthed lip service to, oh, please, can you release the hostages? I want to ask you about the aid situation, because that's the thing buzzing around a lot of media today. I get why Israel is so nervous about letting 100 trucks into Gaza when we know that UN aid agencies have been riddled with Hamas fighters. I get the fear that Israel has about that. But, you know, something has to be done, doesn't it? Because there are civilians starving.
Well, again, Alex, the problem is that Hamas was using the aid to perpetuate the war. Hamas is using the aid, they steal it, then they sell it to their own people, and with that money, they pay their soldiers. And so us letting uncontrolled aid in is basically us funding the offensive against us, which is ridiculous. So, like I said to Channel 4 this week, what do real friends do? Real friends don't condemn. Real friends say, sit down and say, yes, Israel, we know you're in a dilemma. We know you're in a catch-22.
They have each other's backs. Fleur, I'm going to have to stop you because we've got to go to break, but thank you ever so much for that candour. Right, taking a break now. See you on the other side.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock today. Ranting and raving today, I'll tell you that. I mean, I didn't have much sleep, so I've come in having gotten out of bed on the wrong side, and doesn't it show? Oh, I'm getting a bit gritty today. But you can help me out if you'd like to by throwing your opinions about the place. Don't leave it all up to me. Sharing is caring. 03444 991000 is the number to call if you would like to be patched through to the studio at some point. You can call at any time. The one for Alicia is going to take your call, make sure that you are, a sensible enough person. And then when the time is right, she'll even call you back. We're that efficient. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number to text. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you send your message. OK, now let's get on to story number 300,682 of all the rubbish things that the Labour Party have done in the past year, which is the fact that because there's no spaces in prison, they're going to have to free a load of prisoners. That's right. First of all, it was just a few tow rags and, bad uns and shoplifters who were popping out of jail with their mates in their Beamers, coming out with their champagne like, woo, we're free, about to go on the rob again. That was bad enough, wasn't it? That was like, great, this isn't a good look if we're letting all these scummers out. But now, the government's latest plan, its sentencing review, it contains a raft of measures to slash the sentences served by prisoners by up to a third. And this includes sex offenders, murderers. So once upon a time, if you were convicted of serious violence or a sexual offence, you'd have to stay in prison for at least 3/4 of your jail term. I never understand why you give someone a sentence and then say, but you only have to do 3/4 of it. Why do that? Anyway, they only have to serve 3/4 of it anyway. But now that's going to be reduced to half. Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Rapists and murderers all over the nation. Rejoice. I mean, I just can't make sense of this stuff. And, you know, if they were able, right, if they were able during those riots to jam a load of people into prison for tweets, surely there was enough space back then, wasn't there, to keep these people locked up? If they were able, during COVID, to, you know, construct these Nightingale hospitals, why on earth can't they just jig up some of the ones like Dartmoor that have been closed because apparently it needs new roof or whatever it needs? Why can't... This just spells for trouble. Let's speak to David Shipley, who himself is a former prisoner, but these days a writer and researcher on prison and justice issues. Welcome to the show, David. Now, I'm going to ask you something relatively personal about your time in Clink. I don't know whether you rubbed shoulders with any of these hard nuts. If you did, how many do you think would be up for rehabilitation, or how many deserve to have the key thrown away?
It's a great question. I think the reality is the prison system is really bad at rehabilitating people. In my experience, though, I did meet men in prison who had done really serious crimes, up to and including murder, who have changed. And I think generally what distinguishes them is they were the ones who took complete personal responsibility for what they'd done, as I did with my crime. And I think there's a lot of excuses that people come up with, a lot of mitigations, a lot of minimizations. And I think the only way you actually get to change is by completely accepting what you've done and then starting to try to be a better person.
Now, some would argue that part of the reason we've got packed prisons, part of the reason, I can think of a multitude more, is the fact that it became vogue, didn't it, for tough-speaking governments, particularly the Conservatives, to keep increasing sentences. We're going to be tough on crime, and if you perpetrate a certain act, you're now going to get even longer in jail. And so most people are like, yeah, good, that's right, that's what you should do. But they hadn't actually accounted for how many extra prison spaces this would mean if people were serving longer sentences. And we do apparently have some of the longest sentences in Europe. Do you think there's any merit to a policy where you're actually reducing some of that prison time? If you know, like you said, there are some people who are rehabilitated who probably could be let out, and everyone loves the story of rehabilitation, or is this just blind mad?
I think the problem is not necessarily how long people spend in prison, it's what happens while they're there. We sort of talk about long sentences if they're tough. But in most jails in the country, most prisoners spend 22 or 23 hours a day staring at daytime TV, getting bored, often getting addicted to drugs. Probably if they've got any employable skills, those skills atrophy. So that's the problem, is what happens there is really wasteful and destructive. And you're absolutely right. We've gone for longer and longer sentences. I think part of the reason for that is the police have got worse and worse at catching criminals. So if you go back 10, 15 years, maybe 15%, 20% of crimes resulted in a charge. Now it's less than 6%. So as the police catch fewer and fewer people, I think we have this kind of societal hunger to punish the ones we do catch. But actually, we'd probably do much better if we could catch more criminals and sentence them to a bit less time, but make sure they're off the streets.
A number of prisons have had to be shut down because apparently their estates are not fit for purpose. There's all sorts of issues where we're told that actually people cannot be kept in those prisons. It would be too hazardous. Do you think, why on earth are we... I mean, I know the Labour Party are now proposing to build new prisons. That's going to take time. But really, are some of these sort of mothballed prisons not able to be used?
With a number of them, the issue is they are very dangerous. And remember, it's not just that you're putting prisoners there, you're asking prison officers to work in these environments, many of which have serious fire risks. So, you know, I think there is a good reason why some of those places aren't suitable. Dartmoor, which you mentioned, is apparently radioactive, but I'm not sure there's any significant evidence of increased cancer risks from people who've been imprisoned there. So I think that one probably could be reopened.
How come it's radioactive? How did that happen?
Oh, because it's in Cornwall. It's the granite, isn't it? It's like, and you get sort of slightly radioactive materials leaking into the water supply and the air, radon gas. But apparently it's at very low levels. I think essentially any old building on Dartmoor has it. So it's probably not that bad.
Wow, maybe the horses on Dartmoor all have 3 heads. I didn't know about that. I want to talk to you now also about, because one of the big issues in prisons, and if we're letting loads of people out early, we better be pretty sure that they're not wrong-uns. One of the big issues that I read about a lot happening in prisons is the amount of conversions to Islamism and the fact that Muslim gangs dominate certain prisons, so much so that the non-Muslims are the ones who have to be put into segregation. Is that also a risk if we're starting to sort of, you know, gut and empty out our prisons back onto the streets?
I think it is, and you're absolutely right about the rise of Islamic gangs and Islamist gangs in prisons. One of the big issues there is that Islam within prison essentially forgives any crime. So, for example, sex offenders are generally ostracized and targeted in the prison system, but if they convert to Islam, they are protected by the brothers. So there are some very strong incentives to join that team. And yeah, of course, those relationships will continue after prison. I know of one man who was in Belmarsh, who came in as a young Muslim guy. He was in for a drug-related offence, nothing too serious. But he was groomed inside, and on release went and committed a terrorist attack. So this absolutely happens, and there absolutely is a risk of it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you've clarified that for me, because that was my big fear with all of this. I mean, is there any other way, do you think, and it's a big question to ask you, because clearly the government don't have a plan, so I'm not sure whether you would be able to have one. Is there any way? We know that by November, the male prison estate is full, that no more people are going to be able to go in there. Yes, we love the idea, people like me, of, if 10% of prisoners are foreign, we should just deport them. But we seem to have a bit of an issue with our lefty lawyers in this country who prevent us doing that very often. Is there any other way we could make sure that wrong-uns are banged up for the whole time they should be?
I think we'd have to spend a lot more money. And what we should do is do it the way the army do. So if you're a soldier or an airman or a seaman and you are jailed while in service, you don't go to normal prison, you go to a place called MCTC Colchester. And whereas our normal prisons have a reoffending rate of between 40 and 60%, Colchester is 9%. And what they do is they get the guys doing stuff every day. There's PT every day, there's training, there's education. If they've got addictions, they get treatment for it. And they actually work to solve the issues so that when that person's released, they're less likely to commit crime. I'm not sure there's a cheaper way of doing that. Of course, you could choose to lock everyone who's ever committed a crime up forever. Then we'd need a million prison places at a huge expense. But if we assume that most people in prison will be out within a few years, what we need to do is invest in making sure the ones who want to change have the opportunities. I think there's a missed opportunity here with the sentencing review. They were talking about the Texas model. In Texas, you could spend 100% of your sentence or more if you're a badly behaved prisoner, or as little as 25%. And that means there's a huge incentive to change. And the prisoners who don't follow the rules get punished for it. Here we've got this very small range, 33% to 50%. I'm not sure it's a big enough incentive to drive the change they're looking for.
And what do you think about this other recommendation by Mr. Gork, that short jail sentences of less than 12 months, which are typically imposed on burglars and thieves, will largely be scrapped? Does that essentially just give a carte blanche to someone who wants to go on the rob to carry on doing so? Because if there is no prison, then what sort of punishments are they going to face? What, a fine or something?
Yeah, I'm really concerned about this. What they've done is they've compared the reoffending rates of people who get short prison sentences with people who get community orders. And they said, oh, look, community orders have lower reoffending rates. So therefore, if we don't imprison these people, crime will come down. The reality is the people who get short prison sentences are not the same as the people who get community orders. People are not getting a short prison sentence for a first offence or often even a fifth or a 10th offence. These are usually, as you said, prolific shoplifters, prolific thieves. And they usually have addiction issues. They've often got mental health issues. Giving them another suspended sentence or another community order is not going to fix any of that. They are likely to just carry on offending. And I think without proper investment in doing something with them when they're not in prison and some effort there, yeah, it's just going to create more crime.
And at the end of the day, this has got to be a massive slap in the face to victims, because if you're somebody who has been the victim of a serious crime, thank goodness, touch wood, I never have been. But if you are, and you wait for the day that the person who did you such wrong is put in prison, you probably want to know that they're going to stay there, that the full sentence will be served, that justice is well and truly delivered. It must be heartbreaking for some people, particularly those who've been the victims of sex crimes, to see the perpetrator regain their freedom.
Yeah, I think it is. I've just been doing an interview a few moments ago with a woman whose partner dragged her out of a car, threw her down some stairs and broke her neck. And earlier this year, before these reforms have come in, he was only sentenced to 4 months on tag, so no time in jail at all. He was on a curfew for 4 months, and that's despite the probation service assessing him at being medium to high risk of reoffending. So already victims are being really let down. And I think there's a huge concern, rightly, that, you know, particularly for these sorts of crimes against women, that there needs to be some level of punishment and protection of victims, which isn't happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone's released from prison early and goes on to commit an offence of that particular order or of any sort of gravity, the government themselves should have to pay compensation to the victim, because I think this is an absolutely appalling policy. Although, of course, when the government pays compensation, that means you and I, the taxpayer, doesn't it? David Shipley, former prisoner, writer and researcher on prison and justice issues, thank you ever so much. Oh, does that boil your blood? Do you want to let it all out? Time for a bit of communal catharsis? I thought so. Come and join me on my psychologist couch. This is where you can vent. It will help you approach your weekend with the burden somewhat lightened. The number, which is your normal network rate, you wouldn't get that on other phone lines that offer such value to your mental health, is 03444991000. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note. 87222 is the number to text. If you do that, you've got to write talk before your message. And when I come back after the break, I'm going to be yakking to some of you guys, reading some of your messages, hopefully playing some voice notes if there are any decent ones out there. And we're going to have a whale of a time together. So don't go anywhere, put the kettle on, and I'll see you on the other side of this.
Not only are we giving them to Mauritius for mysterious reasons, we're saying, as well as giving them to you, would it be okay if we gave you 9 billion quid? We're doing that as well. The deal is absolutely mystifying, baffling. I have no idea what it's all about, apart from the only possible reason, as you say, David, is a kind of treacherous hatred of Britain and these old lefties trying to assuage their guilt about British colonialism. It's pathetic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now it's your opportunity to throw your voice into the mix. 03444 991,000 is the number to dial if you'd like to chit-chatteroo with me. 8722 is the number to text, but talk before your message. If you want to send a WhatsApp, it's 03444 991,000 as well. Now, some breaking news. I love this, right? At the moment, Donald Trump is on an absolute roll, isn't he? He's playing some blinders. I loved it when he sat there with Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African president. He's like, right, turn down the lights. Now I'm going to show you all of the really vile things that are happening inside your country and watch you squirm in front of the world's media. Absolutely genius. Now he's put on Truth Social. I mean, this is brilliant, right? Thank you, the Donald. Our negotiated deal with the United Kingdom is working out well for all. I strongly recommend to them, however, that in order to get their energy costs down, they stop with the costly and unsightly windmills and incentivise modernised drilling in the North Sea, where large amounts of oil lay waiting to be taken. A century of drilling left, with Aberdeen as the hub. The old-fashioned tax system disincentivises drilling rather than the opposite. UK's energy costs would go way down and fast. Well, he's right. Doesn't exactly take a genius to realise that actually if you are self-sufficient, even better actually, if you're a fuel exporter, you can earn quite a lot of bob from it. How do you think Dubai is so rich? How do you think the UAE is so rich? How do you think Saudi is sitting there, you know, throwing their dirhams in the air like it's crystal maze? Because they actually use the oil that they've got, right? And this is what we should be doing. Even if you're out there saying, oh, but the planet's on fire. If we get gas and oil out, the world's going to end tomorrow. Greta's right. She's the oracle. Strange little creature that she is. Even if you're one of those people, OK? You should know that we're still having to import liquefied natural gas from other countries because we haven't transitioned to a fully green grid yet. A fully green grid that doesn't work. Just ask Spain about how their blackout was the other day when all of their windfarms and solar panels didn't have particularly stable currents. And so all of a sudden it went zzz, and the whole thing blew up, plunging them into darkness. You know what would happen in Britain if we had a blackout? Oh, the Spanish were right, nice and sunny outside. Pop open a few bottles of San Mig, sit in the sunshine, have a chat, have a day off work and a day out of school. Great. If we had blackouts in this country, Footlock would be the first thing to go, wouldn't it? The windows would be kicked in before you could say you turn the lights off. And it makes no sense. We have got potentially ridiculous amounts of shale gas, which is a lighter gas actually than natural gas, sitting under our shores. We could be getting that out. It also, guess what, happens to be hanging around in the same areas where we once used to mine, which have been completely deindustrialised, high levels of unemployment. Imagine the rejuvenation to the economies in those localities. Or the scare stories about earthquakes and stuff like that. The highest level of tremor that a bit of fracking would make is the equivalent to a bus going by your house. I mean, come on. This is about national security. This is about prosperity. Like I was ranting about earlier at the opening of the show, energy costs are at the heart of everything. Now, let me explain that little sort of organogram again, shall I? If energy costs were lower, businesses would have more money. We'd have more manufacturing, which would mean more jobs. We'd also be able to pay higher wages if we weren't having to fork out so much cash on energy bills. So therefore, people would have a better quality of life because they'd be earning more money. Then we wouldn't have to import so much foreign labour. So it'd probably also help with immigration. There'd be investment into this country because companies abroad would go, hey, I want to build my plant in Britain. That looks like a really good idea, rather than, woo, why would I go there? It costs £1 a second to keep the lights on. And the public services that are so stretched, oh, more money for the NHS, more. How much do you think it costs to run a ventilator 24/7 when you've got the highest energy bills in the world? If we got rid of this cost of living crisis by actually using the fossil fuels that we have, we would be a healthier place, we'd be a happier place, we'd be a richer place, and this is the sticker, right? When you look at all these nutters around the world, these mad regimes who sometimes we have to pick up the phone to get a bit of gas sent over, which actually, putting it in a tanker and sending it across the ocean pumps out even more CO2 than just getting it out yourself. If we were able to be energy self-sufficient or even sell our own fossil fuels, we would have a lot of international leverage. That's right. I mean, he who pays the piper gets to pick the tune, don't they? And every single bit of our prosperity and our progress as a nation would easily be helped if we just got oil and gas out that we own. I mean, any other country, if they had the sort of oil fields and gas fields that we have, would be rubbing their hands together with delight, going, right, let's get on with that. This is brilliant. Look at all this potential prosperity and power. Oh, no, not this government. They'd rather write a massive cheque to China instead and give them some islands. Honestly, I despair. So thank you, the Donald, for wading in. And do you know what? I wouldn't mind, actually, if you started playing some tariff games with us and said, if you want to sell X, Y and Z into the country for your own benefit, get that oil out. It seems to me that that's what he's hinting about. So thank you for your brilliant intervention, the Donald. I, for one, appreciate it. Now, let's have a play of some voice notes, shall we? This one is from James.
Starmer, I don't think he's British. I think his children are going to have nice holiday places to go to Mauritius. So far, he's called us far-right, racist, Islamophobic, homophobic, put people in prison for 30 words, sold our fishermen and farmers down the river, and now he's making us and our children paying for giving away our territory. What is going on in this country? What is next? Gibraltar? The Falklands? We have no army anyway. Is he working with China? He's certainly not working for Britain.
Yeah, what is going on? I can't make head nor tails of it. The man's only been Prime Minister for a year. He's still got 4 more on the clock. How much of Britain can he sell? How much of it can he destroy before someone else gets to take a turn? I'm not even sure there'll be any Britain left once he's finished with his dastardly governance. Let's hear now from Sharon.
Keir Starmer is just literally a traitor to his own country. He's just in bed with China and everything. He's just working against his own people. What can we do to get rid of this man? Because before 4 years are up, we could be sold down the Swanee with him. It makes my blood boil.
I'd watch yourself there, Sharon. What can we do to get rid of this man? He might think you're inciting violence. You might end up in prison. Because he loves a bit of that, doesn't he? Any threat to the government. I mean, it's actually beyond disaster. It's quite harrowing, some of the things that man does. It seems a lot of you agree with that. I wonder if anyone out there actually likes him. Does anyone want to tell me something good about him? Something he's done well? Yeah, I don't think so. Right, let's listen to Chris.
Chagos Islands, oh my God, what are we doing? There is no sense in this. This is China written all over it, without a shadow of a doubt. The sellout, traitorous bunch of red losers. It's gone beyond a joke now. Does the king have to sign off on this? And if so, why would he? This is ridiculous. The man has no backbone if he signs this, right? He's just a sack of meat.
That was a good one. I enjoyed that, Chris. You know, you're absolutely right. I mean, does anybody like Starmer? I wish there was some sort of democratic recall system that we could say, yeah, don't like that Prime Minister. He's really messing things up. He's jeopardising our country's prosperity and its security all at the same time. But unfortunately, there isn't a way, as Sharon was suggesting, that we can get rid of him, I don't think. I'd love to know if there was. Because you do wonder how much more limitless damage he could actually do. Thank you so much for your calls and your messages. Keep them coming in. The number is 03444991000 if you'd like to register your interest to be patched through to the studio to have a little chit chat with me. Come on. Don't be so shy. I don't bite. And even if I did, I'm just coming out of a screen, aren't I? It's not like I can come through the glass like that girl in The Ring. 8722 is the number to send a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you type out your text. That way, it sort of bings and bongs around all the sort of space junk in the stratosphere and makes its way down the pipelines directly into this little Cape Canaveral format I have set up in front of me. We're on X at talkTV. We're going to take a short break now. Someone's got to pay my bills, don't they? But don't go anywhere, because I can't wait to see you on the other side. And we are going to be joined by a brilliant man, former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat MP, because I bet you something, he ain't going to be happy with that Chagos deal. Let's find out after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I would love to meet anybody other than Keir Starmer and his cronies who actually supports this ridiculous giveaway of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Oh, wasn't even a giveaway. We're paying to hand over sovereign territory to a country that pallies up and has been doing military exercises with one of our worst enemies. Well, worst enemy to some of us, not Sir Keir Starmer. He loves the place. He can't wait to send more ministers over to Beijing to shake hands and do all sorts of dodgy deals. What is the man thinking? I'm pretty sure that Tom Tugendhat, a former security minister, is going to agree with us that this wasn't a good idea at all, was it, Tom?
No, Alex, it wasn't. And I'm not even slightly surprised to hear your views on this. Look, the reality is what we've just done is we haven't just handed over some islands and decided that we're going to pay effectively the winter fuel allowance for more than 300,000 pensioners a year to pay for it, which is pretty extraordinary. We've also conceded that Mauritius has the right to be informed of our military operations. Wow, is all I can say to that. We wouldn't accept that for any other country. I see absolutely no reason we should be accepting it for Mauritius. We'd only do that if we were in a very close alliance relationship, US perhaps, or France, somebody like that. But you know what? The extraordinary thing is it's even worse than that, Alex, because the reality is what they've also done is they've effectively conceded that these courts that were set up deliberately, very deliberately by our predecessors, people like Churchill and so on, and Attlee, Labour and Conservative, they were set up in order to dispute between countries, but not between Commonwealth countries. They've conceded that effectively that's exactly what the court can do. Now, do you think that it's going to stop in Mauritius? No, of course it's not. Of course it's not. Because what China and Russia have discovered since the 1980s is that there are two ways of undermining us. One is you launch an attack. That's what Argentina tried in 1982 in the Falkland Islands. And the second way is you launch legal action. And this is effectively a kind of warfare. We call it lawfare, where you use the law to attack the United Kingdom, to undermine our strategic interests and to leave us weaker. I'm afraid that is exactly what the Starmer government has just conceded to. It's appalling.
I don't understand, Tom, why America went along with this. I thought there would be an 11th hour Trump intervention saying, what on earth do you think you're doing? That's our military base as well. But they kind of apparently said, oh, well, we've looked at the detail and actually this has to happen. What am I missing?
So, first of all, the US doesn't really care, right? For the US, this is an airbase in the Indian Ocean that's 1,300 miles away from, well, anywhere else, pretty much. It's about 1,000 miles away from the Seychelles, 1,300 miles away from Mauritius. As far as the US is concerned, they've got the aircraft carriers and the fleet to defend it. They don't really care what others are going to do. They can operate from it. And any idea that the International Telecoms Union, this sort of international treaty body that comes under the UN, is going to stop them using the electromagnetic spectrum or anything like that, it's complete rubbish. I mean, it's total rubbish. And so the Americans are just looking at it and going, well, does it keep it for 100 years? Yeah, fine, whatever. You know, they don't really care. For us, it's a very different deal, because actually for us, this is effectively the erosion of our sovereignty. Now, that's very different. If you're an American, this is just a property deal. They maintain their rent. It doesn't matter. For us, this is a very, very big change. It's not only about the money. The money is important. This is hundreds of thousands of pensions, winter fuel. This is, I don't know, 20,000 prison places, something like that. It's several thousand nurses' salaries. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. It is actually, much more importantly, this is a direct attack on our ability to defend our interests and to stand up for them. And I'm afraid this is, frankly, the bureaucracy of surrender, the bureaucracy of defeat, and we are going along with it, and it is completely unacceptable.
Are you concerned about this government's seeming obsession with China? Because they've been in power for about a year, and you've already had one of the first visits done by Rachel Reeves was to Beijing. Then David Lammy wormed his way over there. Apparently Jonathan Reynolds has got his tickets booked, and Sir Keir Starmer made it very clear when he became Prime Minister that he really wanted to go and have a big state visit to China. First Prime Minister in 7 years to do so. Meanwhile, Ed Miliband seems to be writing boundless cheques over to Beijing to use slaves to make all sorts of infrastructure that even the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, has written today in The Independent, China can hack these systems. They can mess with the energy grid. And this government seems to just go deaf and blind to security briefings and the integrity of being able to defend ourselves, and go scuttling off to China at a moment's notice. Does that alarm you?
So, Alex, you're speaking as though it's theoretical. This isn't theoretical. Did you see what happened in Spain only a few weeks ago? Did you see their phone lines went down only a few days ago? Look, the reality is we know, this isn't academic, this isn't supposition, we know that there are kill switches in solar panels. Now, you may say, OK, well, so what? It's just, it's just one solar panel. No, all of them, right? That could easily bring down a third of the grid. That could easily bring down a vast amount of power. Now, at the same time, Ed Miliband is absolutely refusing to invest in our energy security by making sure that we have sovereign capabilities out of the North Sea. That's oil and gas and things like that. We should be striking deals with Alberta and with, frankly, actually with Quebec as well, where there are huge energy reserves, so that we actually have dependable, reliable energy sources from a partner nation that we can absolutely rely on, like Canada. Instead, what's the government doing? Oh, yeah, it's sucking up to China. Now, you just need to read some of the stuff that I've been writing about. Recently, John Beck's book, forgive me, I can't remember the title, but John Beck's book about the oppression of the Uyghurs and the way in which these factories are supported is absolutely horrific. What we're seeing is slave labour turning into energy in our fields, and it's tearing up our energy security. It's also tearing up our food security. This is completely ridiculous, and the policies that are being followed are like some sort of ideological pathology, as though somehow or other, if you believe in it even more, it will make it true. It doesn't make it true. It's not true. It's leaving Britain more vulnerable, and I'm afraid the lessons from Spain in the last few weeks are pretty stark.
I mean, I knew you used to do some funny old stuff in the security services, but I didn't realise you had a camera over my back, so I've just written the words food security on my bit of paper. Why do they think that actually papering over agricultural land with, big plastic sheets of solar panels that aren't really going to do anything positive for the grid is a good idea, when actually hostile states such as China have a completely different policy, which is we now have to be 100% food self-sufficient, and we're like, well, we're only 60% now, let's decimate farming at the same time. It's all playing into the hands of our enemies.
It completely, and it's not even a green agenda. Now, I don't know about you, Alex, but I actually do think we need to have a greener future. I do think we need to get off the carbon economy in order to improve our energy security. But the way we do that is by making sure that transition works for us. It's not by simply shoving every job out of the United Kingdom into China, where actually, guess where their power comes from? That's right, coal, right? So the idea that these are somehow green products, well, they're green when they arrive in Kent or when they arrive in the UK, but they're not green when they're made. They're made with the same carbon power that generates carbon dioxide gases and all the rest of it. That unless you believe in some weird basis of scientific nationalism, I'm afraid it affects us all. So it's complete rubbish. What we've got to be doing is making sure that this transition works, protects British jobs, and actually does deliver the change and the innovation that we need to see. Now, we can do it, but we can't do it if the only way in which we're going to do that is by handing jobs to China, by closing down our own industry, and by leaving the British people unemployed. That's completely ridiculous.
You must be pretty pleased, actually, that Donald Trump seems to now be barking orders at Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, J.D. Vance tried to have a subtle word about putting people in clink for writing tweets. Donald Trump has now written on Truth Social, our negotiated deal with the United Kingdom is working out well for all. Thank you, the Donald. I strongly recommend to them, however, that in order to get their energy costs down, they stop with the costly and unsightly windmills and incentivise modernised drilling in the North Sea, where large amounts of oil lay waiting to be taken. UK's energy costs would go way down and fast. And that's at the crux of all of this, because we're a miserable country with failing manufacturing. We can't afford our health service because its bills are through the roof. The cost of energy affects absolutely everything. And it's not even just about our own energy security. If we manage to get into a position where we could become an exporter, it wields a huge amount of diplomatic leverage as well, doesn't it?
Well, that's exactly right. And look, our energy costs are 7 times that of the United States and about 4 times that of Europe. If you look at France, they invested in nuclear energy throughout the 1970s and 80s, and guess what? Generates, I think it's about 70-80% of their power now. And so their power costs are much, much lower. We've got to invest massively in nuclear. We've got to get over this planning rubbish that has meant that we've got this fish disco that's costing a fortune for the Hinkley Point reactor. We've got to make sure that we are investing in the carbon energy that we need and the alliances with countries like Canada that would actually generate that security. And that's the way that we get growth going, because, you know, it's bad enough that Rachel Reeves has put a tax on everybody's job with her NI rises. It's bad enough that she's chasing farmers and small businesses into bankruptcy courts by making sure that they simply can't pass on their assets between generations, which is, after all, what small businesses always do. What they're actually doing is they're taxing all of us into oblivion by simply refusing to allow us to have cheap energy. Cheap energy, I'm afraid, is the single, fundamental, absolutely essential for every single economic, prosperous economy. It is fundamental. There is no other word for it.
Is Donald Trump right to actually intervene, though, or should he just let us get on with making our own mistakes?
Look, I'm not going to say anything about another country's head of state for the simple reason I don't want them to say stuff about ours. I want a British Prime Minister who stands up for Britain. I want a British Prime Minister who says that the interests of the British people come first. I want a British Prime Minister who says that the jobs and the hopes and the aspirations of British people today and in the future are what he is driven by. Instead, we've got some sort of ideologue and his extraordinary church of the sort of the new left and the new green and sort of some sort of watermelon cathedral that's going on around him. It's completely nuts, and I'm afraid we're all paying for it, and that's the reality.
I just want to ask you about something else, actually, because I don't think it's had enough airtime, quite frankly, but astonishing remarks made by Jonathan Hall-Casey at RUSI about foreign interventions, essentially, subversion into the UK. I mean, when Germany binned off all their nuclear power stations, there have been various reports which suggest that a lot of Russian activism and propaganda helped to move the needle to force Germany to make that decision, which was catastrophic for their energy security. And Jonathan Hall-Casey has pretty much said, if I were a hostile state, I would be filling the airwaves with, ooh, climate catastrophe. We must not have any gas and oil. Isn't that dangerous? Yeah, go on Extinction Rebellion, glue yourself to something. Or I don't know what a woman is. Or, oh no, BLM. We're so racist in this country. He actually has come out, he's the one advising the government, come out and said so much of this toxic stuff is being spoon-fed to us via hostile states. And yet the Labour Party just don't seem to get that memo.
Look, I think Jonathan Hall is a fantastic public servant. I mean, he's an independent lawyer who advises the government on various aspects of terrorism and state interference and things like that. I think he's doing a fantastic job, and that speech is one of the most important speeches given by a public security official in a very long time. Look, sedition is specifically one of the things that is on the Security Service Act 1989, so that the security services can actually face off this challenge. You know, we wouldn't have said, oh, you know, the communists are fine with their ideas, but they're not really a threat in the 70s, would we? We wouldn't have said the fascists are okay in the 40s. We would not have done that at all. We would have targeted the propaganda, we'd have targeted the message, we'd have targeted the politics of it, because we knew the threat it was to us. Well, today, guess what? It hasn't finished. Sedition is not over. And the kind of propaganda we're getting out of TikTok on Chinese web apps and things like that, the kind of propaganda that we're getting out of the so-called Internet Research Agency, as it used to be called, it's now got various other different names, out of Moscow is a continuation of it. And by the way, we're also getting it out of different groups out of the Middle East, some things very, very closely aligned to the organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's a real problem. We've got to make sure that the division in our society is not encouraged. You know, we know that this country, this amazing country that we are lucky to be part of, has done a brilliant job at including many, many people. You know, you may like or may not like Rishi Sunak, but the fact that he was of Indian origin was utterly irrelevant. He was the British Prime Minister. You may like his politics, you may not like his politics. Kemi Badenoch, you may like her politics, you may not like her politics, but nobody cares about the fact that she was born in the UK of a Nigerian family. I mean, that's utterly irrelevant. You know, this is a country that has welcomed and included many, many people. We've had a Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, who's done a brilliant job, incredibly courageously standing up for the UK against many different forms of extremism. The fact that he's a British Muslim, who cares? You know, this is a fantastic country, and all that spread of division is utterly rubbish.
Really quick question, because I do have to go to break, but I've got to ask you this. I was speaking to Robert Midgley earlier, who's from the Friends of the British Overseas Territories and also used to work in the Foreign Office, and he suggested that before he became Prime Minister, Starmer had an all-expenses-paid trip to Mauritius. Do you trust him? Do we need to be looking into some of his connections?
Look, I think he's made some pretty staggeringly awful decisions, but let's look at the context in which he's made them. He's made them at a time when actually we've got an entire department that seems to be much more interested in sucking up drinks parties and looking good at the international legal circuit in the UN and in New York and in The Hague, rather than standing up for Britain's interests. So you're absolutely right that the end of this process has been Keir Starmer signing on the dotted line and signing the surrender document. But the reality is this has been built up over years and years and years. And only a good foreign secretary like David Cameron was able to stop it. But I'm afraid the pressure of the administration has been continuous. And all that Keir Starmer has done is demonstrated that he's weak.
Tom, it's wonderful catching up with you, one of my favourite MPs. I know I'm not supposed to have favourites, but I do like Tom. Tom Tugendhat, ladies and gentlemen. Right, we're going to go to an advert break now, and then after that we're going to be joined by my favourite economist. What a lucky girl I am. Liam Halligan is going to be on the show to talk us through all the terrible decisions Rayner and Reeves are making at the moment. That's after this.
And so one thing that we've done recently, which is desperately needed, is we've done a report on the grooming gangs, basically showing the facts of it, showing that it is majority Muslim, it's majority Asian grooming gangs, and the victims are white. And we've gone into why this has been shoved under the rug, why this has been neglected, and it's mostly because of political pressure and, you know, the authorities turning the other way.
What is the nature of the political pressure? Have we worked it out yet?
I think they're worried about being called racist.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I hope you're hungry for more information, more news and more views, because I've still got a veritable banquet of broadcasting brilliance coming up. At 12 o'clock, actually, we're going to be joined by Reform UK's latest MP, Sarah Pochin, to talk about all things politics. I can't wait to do that interview. It'll be the first time I've interviewed her. Yeah, really looking forward to hear her thoughts on what's going on today. But before we do that, let us now speak to Mr. Liam Halligan, economist, columnist at The Telegraph, author of When the Facts Change on his Substack. He's a wonderful friend of mine. He's the only person, frankly, who makes economics entertaining. Welcome to the show, Liam.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Right, now, let's start off with a whole platter of misery, because apparently tax rises are inevitable because of Starmer's public sector pay rises. I saw one particular Labour MP tweeting out today, oh, look, wages have gone up in the UK since we came into power. No one's talking about that. And I'm like, because you put them up, you moron. You gave all your mates in the public sector inflation-busting pay rises. What do you think was going to happen? Problem is, of course, that costs a lot of money, doesn't it?
It does indeed. Numbers just came out earlier this week, Alex. The UK borrowed £20 billion in the single month of April. That's an enormous amount of money. That's what the money that you get from about 3p on the basic rate of income tax for an entire year. And borrowing for the fiscal year that's just ended, April to April 2020, April 24, April 25, was over £150 billion. That's about £15 billion more than the Office for Budget Responsibility thought it would be. Why should we care about that? We should care about that, Alex, because that adds to the stock of the so-called national debt, almost 100% of GDP. The debt pile's as big as the entire economy, and we pay interest on that. The government pays interest on that, money that can't go to frontline public services and other public spending that we need to do. The interest, Alex, hang on to your hat, strap yourself in. The interest we're paying on our national debt each year now is £105 billion. That's almost twice what we spend on defence. It's more than we spend on schools and transport combined. And that's on the servicing the debt. That's the interest payments. It's not paying back the debt. Our spending is now out of control. Borrowing is out of control. It was pretty bad at the end of 14 years of Tory government, particularly after the money no object lunacy of all that lockdown spending. And yet Labour have taken a difficult fiscal inheritance, and frankly, Alex, they've ideologically doubled down. They've jacked up spending, as you said, not least on public sector pay deals for their trade unionised mates, the paymasters in the trade unions. Only a fifth of us work in the public sector. They've been getting chunky pay rises. Average public sector pay now well above average private sector pay, and they got all kinds of other fantastic conditions, pensions that we don't get, you know, loads of sick leave, loads of holiday entitlement, loads of flexi lanyard wearing classes. Labour have doubled down with a lot more public spending, fuelled by more borrowing, and that, Alex, is why the bond markets are now looking pretty yippy, to use Trump's words. They're getting angry. They're pushing interest rates and borrowing costs up. For all of us, whatever the Bank of England says, interest rates, borrowing costs are higher now because of all that government spending.
I mean, Rachel, he's pretty much crashed the economy. Is there anything that any government in the future could do about this 105 billion on the interest on the national debt? Is there any way of sort of negotiating that, sorting that out? I mean, are there any options available? Because that's catastrophic.
Well, you got to pay your debts back, because if you don't pay your debts back, then no one will borrow, lend money to you, and you know you'll be Argentina in the 70s, or you'll be Zimbabwe in the 80s. You know, the economy will literally, or Britain back in the mid 70s when we had to be bailed out by the International Monetary Fund. I was alive then, Alex. I just about remember it. You, of course, are far too fresh-faced and young to remember that, though I know you've read about it and take a serious interest in that period of economic history. We've discussed it over many years. You mentioned there the phrase crashing the economy. Interesting you should say that, because of course that's what Liz Truss is often accused of doing. The government borrowing cost, the 10-year gilt yield as we call it, the amount of money the government must pay investors, insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, really big money investors that lend governments money. The 10-year gilt yield is what you have to pay those guys in order to borrow money for 10 years, right? That 10-year gilt yield, that rate of interest, is now way higher than it was under Liz Truss at the peak of her so-called mini-budget crisis. Where is the outcry? Where is the BBC going, oh my God, the economy's falling to bits? Complete double standards. How do you get out of this debt hole? it's very difficult to actually cut government spending. We talk about welfare cuts all the time. What we're talking about is slowing down the rate of increase of welfare spending. The only way you can really handle this debt is to slow the rate of increase of spending so the financial markets know you're serious, and not raise taxes. That's madness. Because if you raise taxes from their current really high level, you're going to get just a slower economy. Loads of enterprise that would happen won't happen. Factories won't be built. People won't be employed. A lot of the high rollers will go to Heathrow and Gatwick, frankly, and for the long departure allowed and bugger off with their money. The top 1% of earners pay 30% of all income tax revenue. Get your head around that. The only way you can really, I think, deal with debts like this is to grow the economy so the economy can handle the bigger debt. The share of debt as a percentage of GDP comes down, and the only way you can grow when taxes are really, really high, it takes a brave politician. You've really got to know what you're doing. You've got to lead from the front. There might be some short-term costs, but it's to get rid of taxation, get rid of regulation, get rid of all the obstacles, all the nonsense that Angela Rayner's talking about in this, frankly, student politics memo. Get rid of all that and let business get on with what it does best. Building things, employing people, generating wealth, growing the economy.
I mean, that's what they promised, isn't it? That was the whole sort of key of their manifesto.
Yeah, fix the foundations.
Yeah, well, but so Donald Trump seems to think he's got the recipe for success, and I'm minded to agree with him. He is basically directly intervening. He's written on Truth Social to Sir Keir Starmer, get ahead with modernised drilling in the North Sea. Large amounts of oil lay waiting to be taken. UK's energy costs would go way down and fast. And actually, surely, if we were able to slash those energy costs, imagine as well if we actually exported some of those fossil fuels, put it in a sovereign wealth fund, I don't know, used it to pay back some of that ridiculous debt. That this is basically is begging to be done. And yet Mad Ed Zero, no, we can't do that. We're going to create a load of jobs in the green sector. No, you're not. You just gave all those jobs and all that cash money to China, you fool. I mean, Donald Trump's right, isn't he?
He is in this case, yeah, he is. It's insane to not drill the oil and gas that we've got in the North Sea. Even the Climate Change Commission, Alex, which is the government's sort of in-house green conscience stuff full of wokesters, which by law are able to call out the government if the government, in their mind, isn't doing enough on net zero. Even they acknowledge that even if we hit these ridiculously ambitious, nay, impossible net zero targets by 2050, we're still going to be relying on oil and gas for about 25, 30, 35% of our energy, down from 80% today. Yes, 80%, whatever you read in the newspapers, that's the share of our total energy that is oil and gas. So what we're doing instead, so Ed Miliband can feel good about himself, and frankly, it's not just Ed Miliband, because the Tories imposed a ridiculous windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas, 75%, making many, many fields unviable. What we're doing instead is we're shipping in gas in LNG form, liquefied natural gas from America. That costs huge amounts of money. It also costs huge amounts of carbon, if that worries you, to liquefy the gas, to gasify it at the other end, not to say thousands of gallons of diesel in the freight ships that bring over the LNG, just so we can say, oh, we've met our net zero targets. It's moronic. And guess what? A lot of the trade unions know that it's moronic, indulgent, centrist dad claptrap. The GMB, the third biggest union, they've got an awful lot of brilliant oil and gas workers in the UK. We have a superb oil and gas industry, a superb energy industry. It employs hundreds of thousands of people, not just up on the coast of Aberdeen, which, by the way, is the oil and gas capital of Europe, that Ed Miliband is killing off with his indulgent student politics nonsense. We have oil and gas workers, energy complex workers all over the country, down in Southampton, Grangemouth, Scotland's only oil refinery being closed down. Thousands and thousands of jobs, Alex, hundreds of millions, billions of pounds of tax revenue, up the
down the drain. Down the drain. Liam, my darling, thank you ever so much. You've entertained me and informed me, as you always do. Now, when I come back, we'll be speaking to Sarah Pochin. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the programme. Alex Phillips here with you all the way through until 1 o'clock. It's been a lively first 2 hours of the show. Some brilliant guests. Really enjoying myself, actually. Came in like a bear with a sore head. I'm going to be springing back out into the London air like a little nymph. Right, now, I'm quite excited about our next guest as well, because it is Reform UK's latest MP. I'm yet to do an interview with her, and I can't wait to learn of all of her views on the things that are in the news. So let's welcome her to the show now. It's Sarah Pochin, MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Hello and good afternoon to you, Sarah. How are you doing?
Hi, Alex. I'm really well. Lovely to be on your show. Thank you for asking me.
How's it been so far, by the way? You know, because it's not very often I speak to a brand new shiny MP. Are you finding the ropes?
It's a roller coaster. I think because there's only 5 of us, of course, currently in Reform, then there's an awful lot of work to do. So in terms of actually getting established as a new MP, there's a lot to do on that front. But there's so much work to do as well. So, yeah, I'm crazy busy, but absolutely loving it.
Good. That's what we like to hear. Now, let's talk first of all about the UK net migration figures. Apparently there are warnings of dire worker shortages because net migration has come down by half. I mean, I would say brilliant, great. Net migration's down by half. Can we bring it down by 100%? That would suit me. But this does have the potential to impact on the economy, where so many companies, quite frankly, lazily, have become very attached to getting in cheaper foreign labour.
Look, what's really important about these figures that have come out is we've heard net migration has gone down to 437,000. That is a town the size of Bristol. That is nothing to be proud of, and it's certainly nothing that this Labour government have achieved themselves. But what the key is that we need to think about is who is leaving and who is coming in. So we know that since this Labour government has come into power, that the multi-millionaires or just millionaires are leaving in their droves. Now, those are the taxpayers, those are the people we need in this country. So I would like to understand exactly from this government what kind of profile is coming in and what are the profiles of those that are leaving, because I have a feeling that this is no good for our economy, but not necessarily for the reasons that you were indicating there, Alex, in terms of actually, workforce available, but it's definitely not in the interest of the country in terms of the economy.
I mean, people are talking about things like a crisis in the care sector in particular, given how many people we need to prop up our public services. We always hear as well, don't we? Oh, well, we need immigration for the NHS, all the hard-working doctors and nurses. Always got to say hard-working doctors and nurses if you mention the NHS. It's like there's some sort of unwritten political rule on that. And that actually, cutting the numbers of people coming in could have a very serious impact on such sectors.
Look, the fact is that we currently have a population of what we call NEETs, currently not in employment or training, of age range between 16 and 24-year-olds, which are not in work, which are not in training, not in education. Why not, Alex? Because that level of available workforce to us are not contributing currently to society, but they are claiming benefits. So that has got to stop. We are in this culture at the moment where we are not getting up in the mornings, not setting our alarms, not getting out to work. Those people, if they wanted jobs, even if it might not be the career job that they want, but they can certainly get out there and work. We could be filling these places with our own people. So we've got to stop this. The benefit culture is just too easy in this country.
Well, I tend to agree with you on that one. Let's talk now about reform in local government, because much like you, Sarah, there are men and women up and down the country, hundreds of them in fact, who find themselves not just Reform UK councillors for the first time, but councillors for the first time. And like you, they're going to be pretty busy and facing one heck of a learning curve. Well, apparently Durham, which is now a Reform-run council, have already got out of the starters' blocks and done exactly what they said they were going to do by taking down all of the virtue signalling flags from its public buildings, including the Ukrainian flag, and facing a bit of a backlash for it.
Look, in my opinion, all of these public buildings should be flying the the flag of our country. We should be flying the Union Jack. Of course, on certain days we have, St George's Day or whatever day it might be, there are appropriate flags to fly on different days. But, we should all be loud and proud about flying the Union Jack. So as far as that's concerned, I don't really have an issue with that. But what I would say about these new councillors, people are saying it's almost like they're waiting for reform to fail. Well, I was a borough councillor for 8 years. I know that when you first go in as a borough councillor or a county councillor or whatever it might be, yes, it's a steep learning curve, but we've got high quality individuals now in this party, people that know what they're doing. I know that the council leaders that are in place that will be responsible for the new groups, the 10 councils that we've now got control of, are a high calibre person. I've met some of them. I'm very impressed with them. I have no doubt in my mind that reform is going to make a huge success out of running these councils and, most importantly, cutting waste.
Right, I wanted to ask you about some of these policies, actually, because as well as doging the districts, I'd be interested to know how that is going to be conducted and whether it's actually going to add to the costs of a council to perform such a broad-reaching audit, but also in terms of stopping migrant hotels and migrants being put into private rental accommodation. That's been one of Reform's big policies in this local election. I understand there is a sort of star chamber of barristers who are actually working pro bono to try and make sure that some of these plans can be scuppered. What happens if they don't manage to achieve it, though? What if it goes to court and the court says, sorry, this is the law of the land, this has been imposed on you by the Home Office, you've got to get on with it? What then?
Look, the fact is that successive governments have failed to tackle this immigration problem. The current policy of using hotels, I've got one in my constituency of Runcorn and Helsby, where I am now, the Daresbury Hotel, to house illegal immigrants has been a disaster, because it's just in the community, they're not contributing to the community, and it's causing unrest with local residents. What's happening now, Labour are saying they're going to shut these hotels down and move these residents out into the community, into houses of multiple occupancy. So in other words, here in Runcorn, we've got in our communities houses with maybe 10, 15 young men in them, 3-bedroomed houses designed for families living in the community. That is only going to cause problems. Yes, Reform's policy is to do something about that. Yes, we want to certainly in terms of the asylum hotels, shut them down, move those people out, move them to a location where they'll be processed and sent home. Anyone that comes here illegally will be sent home if Reform's in government, when Reform is in government. The risk, Alex, is the people that have gone into the houses of multiple occupancy that are out in the community, because once they're out in the community, they are very difficult to keep track of. And that's where you get the problem of grooming gangs, of drug dealing gangs, of people trafficking, and a whole new level of very dark crime starts.
Yeah, I want to ask you about some of that in just a moment. But quick question before we move on to things such as women's safety. I know that it's a passion of yours. Well, it sounds funny, a passion of yours, but a subject you're very keen to keep in the public eye. The doging of local councils, how's that going to be paid for? How are these audits going to be conducted?
Well, the whole point is it saves money. I know from my experience, both as 20 years as a magistrate and 8 years as a borough councillor, the money that is wasted on translation services, for example. I can't tell you, the cost of translating something into 14 languages, I think it was, in the area that I was a councillor for. So this DOGE, if you'd like to call it that, this Department of Government Efficiency, isn't it, I think, that is all about saving money. So yes, it will, I guess, cost money to do some of these things, but the whole point is we're saving millions by doing these sort of initiatives, not having, officers that are, when I say officers, I mean council workers, council officers, employees that are there simply to think up some new pronouns or new woke policies. That all has to go. Reform is about common sense, and that is what these 10 councils will instill back into the community.
Now, I've often thought it's pretty commonsensical that if you're getting young men from countries where women have to dress up like ghosts, a bit of anger will send them all berserk, where stoning a woman for, having her hair down is considered normal practice, that if you extract men from countries with those sorts of belief systems and dump them into the UK, they don't suddenly have a lobotomy and change their opinions on women, and that's going to be a pretty dangerous cocktail. You mentioned earlier about when these young men are going into private rental accommodation and they cannot be monitored, the sort of impact that could have on the local community. How concerned are you about women's safety today?
Well, I'm very concerned here for my constituency in this area of Runcorn, because I saw through the campaign, ladies would come in with me, very brave ladies come in to show me CCTV of nighttime activity of houses in their street, men, clearly drug dealing going on, men arriving with knives. I've seen the footage. Yes, it's been reported to the police, but I've seen it with my own eyes. Even stories of taxis of young women being dropped off at night and being picked up in the morning. Disgraceful behaviour, shameful things are going on, things that people are frightened about that they shouldn't have to put up with. The fact is that women's safety is at risk. We know from evidence, from figures, that the ethnic minorities groups, there's a higher level of attack on, white Western women like myself than any other group. That is a fact. We can't escape it. It just takes somebody like myself who's brave enough to stand up and say, we need to face up to these facts and do something about it. And this government, I believe, is in denial about these policies on how to integrate these illegal immigrants into society. But the other thing I would say, which is really scary, we've been talking about illegal immigrants here. There is a whole element of our society now which are here legally and living here, which have severely anti-women views. And that is something that we're not talking about, which we should be talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just don't know what the solution is, especially people who are here legally might even be born in this country. What on earth can we do if they hold these sort of horrible medieval misogynistic attitudes towards women? What can we do to change that?
I'll tell you what we do for a start. We stop putting into prison for ridiculously long prison sentences. And as I say, I was a magistrate for 20 years, so I'm speaking with some experience. Stop putting people into prison, like, for example, Lucy Connolly. I am not undermining what she said, but to have her in prison for, I think it's 31 months with no parole, no possibility of seeing her children, whatever it is. I mean, let's get some perspective on this.
Are you surprised she's in prison at all, actually? Do you think that she'd had an actual, because as a former magistrate, do you think if she'd had an actual court case rather than be told to plead guilty that she would have even ended up incarcerated?
No, I don't. And all this stuff that's come out this week about from the Labour government about the David Gauke prison review would just point to that. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the point I want to make, Alex, which is really important, is you just have to go onto social media and you look at some of the hate preaching that's going on social media unchecked. Why are those people not being arrested and put into prison? Because they're the women haters, but much more than that, they hate this Western society, but they are here. It's not being clamped down on. They are free to spread their hate, and they're not being arrested and they're not being put into prison. In fact, why are they even here?
Well, I couldn't agree more, quite frankly, and I think we've become really livid about dealing with some of these deeply urgent issues. Women and girls thrown under the bus, but just because of wokery, because of not upsetting some communities. I'm sorry, that's not a civilised society. I want to ask you about your campaign. I mean, you wouldn't... Had you run ever before for a general election?
I ran in 2017 up in Bolton South East. That was when Theresa May was the Prime Minister. So that was back in the day when I was a Conservative. I left the Conservatives in 2020, so 5 years ago. But back then, and of course there wasn't reform back then, so I didn't have this option. But a huge privilege to be chosen as the candidate to represent reform in this by-election. And now a huge privilege to have won and be representing the constituents.
How was that campaign, though? I mean, were there dirty tricks? Did you come under a lot of attack? Some people, in this day and age, politics has become really nasty. And I don't just mean from, the other parties who come up with all sorts of accusations and smear you and put things in the press, which is bad enough. But the level of intimidation as well, and sort of threats to safety that now happens in politics. Listening to some of the horrible things that happened to Andrea Jenkins, I just wanted to know how your campaign was. Was it all sort of neat, clean and sportsmanlike? Was it all cricket? Or did you feel it was pretty unpleasant?
Well, do you know what? I had an amazing team that looked after me literally so well. No, I didn't feel threatened. I have to say that the general people here in Runcorn and Helsby, they're hardworking people. They just want fairness. They just want someone to stand up for them for what is right. I'm a strong voice. I'm a brave voice. As I say, I've worked in the courts for 20 years. There's not much I haven't seen or had thrown at me over that time. So, and the other thing, with respect to dirty tricks, look, Reform now have the highest standards of choosing their candidates. And I was thoroughly vetted. Nobody I don't think anyone who's been around as long as I have would say there's no skeletons in their cupboard, but there's certainly nothing that I hope would ever bring the party into disrepute. So, I hope that I'm a safe pair of hands for them.
Oh, well, pleased to hear that one, Sarah. Now, before I let you go, it'd be remiss of me not to ask about that ugly battle that happened between Rupert Lowe and Reform UK. I mean, he's very much on the outside now, doing the proverbial back inside the tent. It wasn't a very edifying, set of circumstances, was it? How hard has it been for you? I mean, people must ask this question of you all the time. How hard was it to enter a party in the midst of all of that?
Actually, they do ask me, and I can't understand why. It's history. I described Rupert Lowe as white noise, I think, on Newsnight the other night. And that's what he is. I'm busy getting on with some really serious issues, raising the issues of, that we've been talking about. I've been talking about a lot about prisons this week, raising the issues of safety of everyone, not just women and girls, raising issues of immigration. And people want to ask me about Rupert Lowe. Look, he's irrelevant. I've met him once very briefly on the terraces actually in Parliament, but that was only last week. I came in after the whole Rupert Lowe saga. Do you know what? It's politics. Look at the Labour Party. Look at the Conservative Party. They have endless scandals to deal with. This wasn't even a scandal, but they have endless scandals to deal with. This was just a falling out. It's really before my time. I'm not interested. I've got far more important things to talk to people like you about, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'd be unfair because it was before your time of asking how you think the party handled it. I don't believe in sort of doing gotchas like that. Sarah Pochin, thank you ever so much for coming on to the programme today. Really, really enjoyed that interview. That was my first interview with Sarah. She's fired up, isn't she? Let's see how she does an MP, and let's see if she can get the Daresby Hotel in Runcorn closed down, because Reform have said they're going to do that. So all eyes will be on some of these promises and whether or not the party can deliver. Right, we're going to take a short advert break now, but after the break it's your opportunity to have a chit chat with me, and I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial to keep me company for the last 45 minutes in the studio. 87222 is the number to send a text message. If you do that, write talk before you text. Also, you can type 0344 499 1000 into your phone in order to send us a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note. I love them. You know I love them. Don't deprive me. Come on. Right, short break now, but I'll see you on the other side.
Even though what she tweeted was vile, in no circumstances can I claim or justify that it was an incitement to violence, because she very clearly says in her tweet that actually they can burn these hotels for all I care. Now, that is not an incitement to violence. That is basically a declaration that she has no care for these people living in her communities who she perceived to be a threat to the communities. And she should never have been arrested. She should never have been charged. She should never have been convicted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
All righty, hello. It's time for the democratic bit of the show where every voice counts, not just mine. Let's rattle through some messages, hear some voice notes and take a call. Stephen in London says, James Price was absolutely spot on. I've been saying this for a while. The current crop are either Chinese communist agents working against this country and the West, or they are complete morons. I'm siding with naive, juvenile morons. Well, I'm glad you are, because I'm beginning to think it's so catastrophic and so ludicrous that it's... I'm genuinely quite worried, to be honest, about what their intentions are and why they keep getting on planes over to China. Talking about Gaza, talking about the fact that Netanyahu has absolutely given verbally a pasting to Mark Carney, Emmanuel Macron and Sir Keir Starmer for handing a win to Hamas by telling Israel to have a ceasefire and talking about setting up a Palestinian state. Michelle says, hi Alex, Fleur is right. They're causing so many problems. They're not going to stop with Israel. It's okay. We're paying to house them too. And Mike says Hamas is a death cult, and by their own admission, they worship death. They love death more than life. May I suggest we hand them that which they love. And Simon in Essex, I always look forward to Fridays when you're on air. Oh, thank you. Plus the added bonus that it's Saturday tomorrow. Indeed it is. That means a lion. You asked to something good. You asked for something good that Keith Starmer has done. Love it when people call him Keith. Very simple. He's rendered the Labour Party totally unelectable forevermore, if they even allow another general election. Well, you never know. Look what happened when we gave Hong Kong over to China. I'm sure this is on the subject of the Chagos Islands from Brian. China will now have backdoor control over Mauritius and will eventually take control of the Chagos Islands and gain naval superiority in that region. This deal amounts to treachery by the UK, and the PM will one day be held to account for his actions. Hi Alex, sorry, but I get angry when Talk has Conservatives on and they spout nonsense. They had 14 years in office and did nothing. There is much to blame for the state of UK is in. That's Dean from Dagenham. Well, I think Tugendhat did an all right job as Securities Minister, because he definitely knows his brief on that one. Labour's economic policy is like a six-armed monkey throwing confetti about. These Labour people are absolutely nuts. That's from Tad. Couldn't agree more. Shall we get into some voice notes now? Let's listen to Trevor on Chagos.
In the 19th century, China was military defeated and they called it their century of shame. In the 21st century, Britain are doing exactly the same, apart from they're even helping our enemies to defeat us. Not only helping, but paying.
Oh yeah, exactly. Paying for our enemies to get in on critical sovereign territory that we've given away for no reason but because a really dodgy woke international court said we should. Let's listen now to Lee on Sir Keir Starmer.
Starmer is nothing but a globalist, Britain-hating Marxist. He won't be happy until this country is no more than a patio on the edge of the European landmass. No possession, no power, no governance, no nothing. He's a traitor.
Yeah, well, couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest. I think we need to give a gold star to Lee on that one. Let's hear Michael.
Starmer is a dictator. He won't listen to anybody that's more sensible than himself. I mean, especially Donald Trump now is weighed in. He thinks he's cleverer than Trump. Starmer is a loser. His government is a loser. You will not be happy till this country is signed away to everybody. I just despair, just feel like moving away somewhere. My heart weeps for this country, Alex.
This is the thing, even like me, like one of the biggest patriots you'll ever meet, even I'm like, oh gosh, do I have to stay here? I'll tell you what I am doing though, I'm going to move out of London because that place has become a hellhole thanks to Sir Sadiq Khan. Weasel that he is. Honestly, if you live in London, yes, it's just a nightmare. I'm getting back out to where the normal people are. Here we go. John in Norwich has said, grab your popcorn and settle in. The stage is set as America soars into the golden age of wealth and prosperity. Or pour yourself a stiff drink and watch as Britain plunges into the wooden age, marked by poverty and social unrest. These are the contrasting visions of the Trump policies and the Starmer policies that will shape the next 4 years. Watch closely. Well, I don't think we're going to need to watch closely. I think it's going to be on our doorsteps, happening to us and ruining our lives. I think it'll be pretty hard to ignore. But I totally agree, and thank goodness for Donald Trump's truth social intervention. Not that that mad Ed with his permanent congestion is ever going to listen to the idea that we should be getting oil and gas out the North Sea. He's concreted up the holes. They should have put him down there first. Let's speak to Georgina, who's in London.
Hello, my darling. You're looking gorgeous as ever. I just want to say about Mad Ed Miliband, the man is about as much use as a one-legged man at a bottom-kicking party. I don't even know how he's still in a job. I mean, he's going mad about all this solar panels, get all our beautiful countryside is being covered in them. He's putting our farmers out of business. He's having the solar panels made in China instead of having them made here. Not that we need them anyway. We've got all the fuel we need in our own country. But the thing that frightens me, he's doing that on the one hand with the solar panels, and then he's doing experiments on how to dim the sun. Now, isn't that strange to you, Alex?
This is the ARIA thing, isn't it? Where, it's a big government. Rishi Sunak, actually, is the one who set up this ARIA thing, giving loads of funny money to experimental innovation projects, which by and large, I like a bit of investment into our sciences. That would be great. But not these mad things where they're going into the oceans and kicking up a lot of salt in the air to try and reflect the sun and messing about with chemicals in clouds. I mean, that stuff's just really creepy. And how does it make sense? On one hand, you're like, better block the sun, that's no good, we need a bit of extra cloud, and then chucking solar panels everywhere. It's a contradiction.
To me, that is a contradiction in terms, as you just said. That's like putting a wind farm in the middle of the Sahara. They're spending ridiculous amounts of our money that we don't want to spend, Alex. We don't want this net zero ideology. This is pie in the sky. We've got our own oil. We've got our own coal. We've got our own workforce here in England to do the hard work. We don't need to import labour from other countries. We don't need other countries to come in and dictate to us how we're going to heat our homes. This is ridiculous. It needs stopping now.
Oh, if only we could. They've only been in power a year, Georgina. You've got 4 more to go, my love. Strap yourself in. I think it's going to get ugly. Thank you ever so much for your call. Georgina's a regular. I love it when she calls in. I think she should sit in the studio and do some presenting. She's a fiery woman, isn't she? Always enjoy hearing her voice. Let's do a couple of messages before we go to advert break. Terry in Darwin says, where has the British backbone gone? Can you see the French people putting up with the sort of stuff going on here? This government is totally spineless. Bully boys, picking on the weakest. Can you imagine what would happen if Argentina invaded the Falklands tomorrow? No way would Starmer send a task force. He'd give Argentina billions to look after it. Well, you're absolutely right. And I know what you mean by the French. I mean, they do love a good old grève. No, grève is it? A grève, which is a strike. But for them, it's never a strike alone, is it? It's like get the car tyres out, set them on fire. Let's have a proper big old protest in the street. But you can't say this, Terry. If you incite any sort of rioting or protest, you know what happens. You'll go to prison. That's right, because we are run by a dictator. Completely agree with this lady about the benefit system in this country. I think by this lady, you must be referring to Sarah Pochin, Reform UK's latest MP. I've worked all my life, never claimed any benefits ever. 43 years I've worked and paid taxes, never been out of work. Why am I in a minority? Asks Darryl in Lincoln. Why indeed? I don't get all of these people who feel like they can't go to a job. When I was growing up, I did all sorts of things. I worked in pubs, nightclubs, data inputting for the NHS, all sorts of things. You delivering newspapers by the age of 14 because that's what you do. Work is good for you because you've got to be able to buy things. I didn't sort of shuffle and scrim and go, I don't want to do that. It doesn't pay enough. Oh, I've got anxiety from leaving the house. No, I got on with it. I didn't have a choice. Right, we're going to take a break now, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about Miliband's mad net zero policy even more, especially the comments from former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, who says that all of this stuff is a massive threat to national security. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back. Now, I have been banging on for a long time, and I'm not alone in this, about how China gets all up in your infrastructure, they spy, they nick your ideas, and they set things up so they can meddle with them in the future. Oh no, that's xenophobic. But China makes things so cheaply. How are we going to save the planet unless China were the ones pumping all the CO2 into the air using coal-fired power stations to make wind farms and solar panels? Lovely China. No, not so lovely China. I mean, incredible intervention this by Sir Richard Dearlove, who was the former head of MI6, who has said that using Chinese technology in the UK's wind farms, solar panels, electric cars and other green energy infrastructure is a threat to national security. He said it's so crazy, the whole policy is completely mad. Problem is, you've got ideological Ed Miliband pursuing net zero without a thought for any impact on national security. Now, Dearlove has previously warned against relying on China for Britain's energy infrastructure. And you wonder, don't you? You wonder whether any of these security briefings pass the Prime Minister's desk. Does he just ignore them? Is he that much of a zealot like Mad Ed about climate change? And he's just like, yeah, well, never mind if China can turn it all off. I mean, it's my big question of the day. Is Starmer actually working for the Chinese Communist Party? Well, let's speak to Ross Clark, who's a brilliant columnist at The Sun, and he's the author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You and Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. What a great title for a book. Welcome back to the show, Ross. I mean...
Good afternoon.
America has found out, they've looked at their own solar panels from China and found that there are these so-called kill switches, which could be essentially overridden from aboard to turn them off, which could create massive fluctuations in the energy system, which could then lead to big blackouts, the style of which Spain just suffered. So why on earth are we pushing ahead with this stuff if it's a direct threat to national security?
Yes, well, I mean, of course, Ed Miliband tries to sell his policy of creating an electricity grid based mostly on wind and solar by telling us it's going to boost national security. He said it's going to reduce our dependency on what he calls fossil fuel dictators, who he claims set the oil and gas prices. Well, it's not quite like that at all, actually. In fact, the biggest gas supplier in the world is the US, and the prices are set locally. But that's his claim. But, you know, he's totally ignoring the other side of things, which Sir Richard Dearlove, has brought to light today, that relying on Chinese-made kit, Chinese-made solar panels, wind turbines, other kit for the grid is itself a serious threat to national security. And the discovery of these kill switches by the US National Security Agency last week in Chinese-made solar panels just shows the potential, and I call it potential. I didn't say that China's necessarily going to chuck a switch and remove much of our power from the grid, throw us into blackouts, but clearly the potential is there. And if you're putting kill switches in kit, you've got to think, well, there's a possibility we might actually want to use these things. And we sort of saw the other week what devastation can happen in Spain when the power grid went up. I mean, there's no evidence there, by the way, there was any sort of foreign actors involved. It was just a cock-up. But clearly the potential, you try and electrify everything, make everything dependent on electronics, and make electricity our main source of energy, and you are opening up the country to the potential to be disrupted by bad actors abroad. And that is an issue which the government has just simply not got on top of. It's just totally ignoring it in its rush to hit these net zero targets.
Well, it's absolutely mad. And not just that, you've got to question how safe some of this stuff is, right? Because pregnant women had to be evacuated from a hospital in Bristol after a solar panel fire broke out. I mean, can these things just sort of spontaneously combust?
Well, yes, I understand that fire has been blamed on a fault in the solar panels. It's not the first time they've burst into flames. We've had wind turbines burst into flames as well, and batteries, a large-scale electric battery storage is a serious problem, a serious fire risk. You get something called thermal runaway, where excessive heat turns into fire, and that breeds off itself without actually requiring external supply of oxygen. That's what makes these electrical fires, battery fires, just so dangerous, because it's it's difficult to put them out by the traditional means of smothering them with water, foam, or whatever. It has to be said, obviously, of course, that traditional sources of energy, petrol, gas, and so on, also have severe fire risks, and that every year we lose a few people to gas explosions, and petrol cars, of course, burst into flames when they're crash, or sometimes not when they crash. So, I mean, all sources of energy have their risks, but clearly what's happened there in Bristol today does, open up the reality of the risk, and that is going to have to be managed, and perhaps in a better way than it has been.
I mean,
today.
sticking solar panels on hospitals is the only thing that Ed Miliband's managed to do with his so-called GB Energy, in which about £8 billion or more was pumped into that thing. And all they've managed to do so far is say, yeah, we're going to put some solar panels on hospital. Then look what happens. It makes a mockery. It really does. You must be delighted, therefore, to hear that Donald Trump has put on Truth Social a direct intervention saying to Sir Keir Starmer, get that gas and oil out of the North Sea. Your energy prices are going to go way down. Now, thankfully, Ofgem have lowered the energy price cap today. I'm sure the Labour Party will be indulging a bit of braggadocio about that one, even though it's got naff all to do with anything they've done. But the fact of the matter is, actually, we've got the highest energy prices in the world. It's a drain on the entire economy. And Donald Trump's right, isn't he? We have a very clear solution to all of this.
Yeah, I'm not always the greatest fan of Donald Trump, but one of his great attributes is he tells the truth. He tells things how it was. And, people will sneer at him. People in the Green movement will sneer at him for saying what he's done, what he said today. But he's right that Britain's energy policy works by depriving ourselves of cheaper forms of energy. And unsurprisingly, that has resulted in Britain having the highest domestic and industrial electricity prices in the world, or of any member of the International Energy Agency. That's the government, the UK government's own figures tell us that. And still Ed Miliband, goes around saying, oh, it's our reliance on gas which is causing us, these high electricity prices. No, it's how we're using gas, because we're using gas as a short-term backup for intermittent wind and solar. That's what makes gas power so expensive here. Look at the US. They generate a high proportion of their electricity from gas than we do in Britain, and yet their electricity prices for industrial users in particular are about a quarter of what they are here. It is a very, very severe difference. We are pursuing an extremely expensive energy policy as a result of these net zero targets. And Ed Miliband is denying it, the Green Movement is denying it, but I'm afraid it is becoming more and more obvious by the day that green policies are driving up energy prices in Britain.
Yeah, and it's not even going to move the needle on carbon emissions anyway. Ross Clark, thank you ever so much. The brilliant Deborah Ross Clark there, this is one of the best titles of a book I've ever heard. Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. I wonder what that book's about. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be discussing the scourge of trans ideology. Well, thankfully, ever since that Supreme Court ruling, it seems that certain policies are now in place to reverse some of the dangerous misogynistic stuff that was taking place or being written into guidance. We're not out of the woods yet, though, but I'm going to be joined by Charlie Bentley-Astor, writer and commentator, to find out where we are. Do a little litmus test on the whole world of the trans debate. That's coming up after this.
Every single time these people get together in a room, they get near power and they just implode. And it's going to happen, and his name is Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe is going to tear down reform, and he's going to do it not because he doesn't care about reform. He's going to do it because of the way he was treated.
Let's live in the real world. Rupert Lowe's going to join the Conservative Party, isn't he?
I don't know.
He is, though, isn't he?
I think they probably will take him.
Let's be honest. Yeah. All of these rumours that Rupert Lowe was conspiring with the Conservative Party, they're all going to be proved to be true.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, we might have an absolutely balmy government who seems to be driving us to hell in a handcart. We're at the cliff edge and Sir Keir Starmer's there trying to just prod us over it, isn't he? But at least common sense is growing back. I think we have actually reached peak woke, because we had that Supreme Court ruling, right? I knew when Donald Trump came into power in America it was going to be the start of the reversal of some of this evil. And thankfully, the Supreme Court turned around and said, guess what? A woman can't have a penis. Yay! Like we didn't know that all along. But it's not just about the common sense. It's about all the sick and dangerous stuff that was pushed through before anybody had had a sensible conversation about how this was going to affect women and girls. And that stuff now, thankfully, at last, is going to be reversed. Let's speak to Charlie Bentley-Astor, who's a writer and commentator. Charlie, I mean, thankfully, some welcome news here. Transgender officers are now banned from carrying out strip searches on female detainees, police chiefs have said. Well, good. They shouldn't have been doing it in the first place, should they?
Exactly. I mean, I've always joked on Twitter that if a male officer tried to have a strip search of me for whatever reason, I'd politely deck him. Yeah, it's there's no consideration of women and girls whatsoever in this situation, because you know, we hear all these woke people talking about how during the Me Too movement that women have chronically been let down by the system. And yet, when we talk about sexual trauma, people who've experienced rape in their lives, having to then have a man who identifies as a woman strip search them, is just, well, I mean, it's against their rights, obviously, but it's just disgusting and inhumane as well. But this isn't completely the end of it. Unfortunately, those who identify as trans who have been detained can still be searched by an officer of their sort of chosen sex, which means that men who identify as women can still ask for a female officer to strip search them. Now that female officer has to consent to that arrangement. But you can certainly see how female officers not wanting to appear bigoted or transphobic would be reluctant to sort of protest against such an arrangement, lest she thinks it's going to impact her career.
We'd reached such a dangerous point with all of this stuff, hadn't we, before the Supreme Court ruling? All we ever heard was, oh no, the trans rights are human rights and they're the most persecuted people on earth, all these trans murders, isn't it terrible? And I'm like, okay, right, I only know of one trans murder, which was disgraceful and horrible. I'm not saying it wasn't. But it got to this stage where I feel like men were deliberately trolling women, men who didn't look anything like a woman, with a girt beard and big knobbly knees and shoulders broader than a fullback, putting on frocks and going, oh, I'm a little girl now and I'm going to come into your toilets. They knew what they were doing, didn't they?
Oh my God, the amount of bathrooms that you go in and you find, stickers. I mean, I saw one in London literally yesterday. Trans woman peed here is like they sometimes scroll it on the wall, and it's
so gross. Why are they so obsessed with peeing?
Oh my God, it's only intended to intimidate and assert dominance. If it was simply about letting people live, let people go about their daily lives unharassed, well, that is an act of harassment towards women by saying, I am violating the boundary you set down. And it's been deemed acceptable. And once we get past, some of the legislative aspects of this, we need to get into the reasons why this was considered permissible in the first place, that women's rights could be subverted by men who dressed up as women.
No, it's absolutely, it's sickening, quite frankly, absolutely sickening. Now, this will come as no surprise to anybody, but apparently transgender children tend to be white and privileged. That's according to Britain's so-called strictest head teacher, the incredible Catherine Burble-Singh. And she said she's very unlikely to have any trans pupils in her school because it's got a lot of ethnic minorities there. I mean, that's the thing. This isn't something that, the daughter of a builder's thinking of changing her gender, or, the Muslim boy or girl. It's some sort of strange luxury ideology. It's like having a Gucci handbag, bringing up your kid as a sort of non-gender identified creature.
Well, yeah, you certainly see sort of a weird Stockholm syndrome with mothers in particular sort of transing their boys. There's a really interesting sort of few studies on that. But actually it's really complicated because the sort of label of trans is encompassing a lot of different people with a lot of different issues. And this can be people who simply, as Catherine Burblesing is sort of highlighting, people who simply want to be fashionable, and it is a part of this luxury belief system. And these people will not really commit to, appearing to the opposite sex. They won't go for anything more than therapy. They won't get surgery, all of these kinds of things. And in a few years' time, they'll desist and go back to living as the sex that they were born as. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who have intense, complex traumas, learning difficulties, who come from all kinds of backgrounds. And as we know, actually, in the statistics, there's no hard and fast rule about who is going to identify as trans other than having this underlying issues of trauma. And that can be in lower, middle and upper classes. Now, in the UK, there are 3 times as many sort of middle, upper class kids identifying as trans in that broad label than in deprived areas. However, if you look at more deprived areas, actually dig into those statistics, that's where those who are having the most sort of mental issues are coming from. And it's a compounding factors of socioeconomic background, of family breakdown, violence, child abuse, all of these kinds of things. But actually, race-wise, you would think, and I think, Catherine sort of intuitively is onto something, because families who immigrant families are generally more conservative. We know this from voting patterns, but actually the figures sort of showing that 38% of transgender individuals in the UK identify as non-white, and obviously that is about double the background population. So
the statistics tell a different story then.
Yeah, I think one would definitely have to get into who exactly in these non-white communities are identifying as trans, whether it does then fall into those social economic boundaries, whether it's there is a big distinction between Arab Muslim background children and West African background children, and then several generations down children. So it's a complex issue, but nevertheless, there is that luxury belief thing is definitely perpetuating these issues much longer than we need or want them to go on.
No, definitely. Before I let you go, Charlie, I want to ask you about Lucy Connolly. Sorry to stray off topic, but you did such brilliant reporting of Southport. You kept the nation and your audience on X well informed about everything you were finding out. I mean, that woman should not be in prison, should she? Because as far as I can tell, when Sir Keir Starmer prejudiced everyone's trials, of which she didn't even have one anyway, by calling the nation far-right thugs, he knew what had happened, didn't he?
Oh, he knew exactly, and there's various different investigations that have now come out that said, the far right had nothing to do with it, which most of us intuitively knew anyway, but particularly if you got into the arrest rates of who was done for rioting, we were told that loads of people were bussed in from outside the constituency, and they simply weren't. There are a few people from Manchester and Liverpool, but most people were locals. It was... There's no humanity towards the outrage that particularly working class people felt towards this instance, because I think we all sort of have a suspicion that it's not middle upper class white girls who are getting targeted, whether it be grooming gangs, whether it be people who are cut down in the prime of their lives in the street. And I think Lucy Connolly's case is the perfect encapsulation of this, because, we've seen this Labour MP who's come out as slit people's throats, has got away with basically a slap on the hand, whereas she is in prison for 3 years, which is more than some rapists and molesters are getting. I think prison sentences for hurty words is no good.
It's
anyway.
ridiculous.
This is a class-based persecution, I think. It's not just politics.
I'm surprised more people aren't outraged by it. It's been wonderful catching up with you, Charlie. And I didn't notice we're sort of almost dressed the same. We look like a pair of burglars, don't we? Like we're going to go out with our swag bags. Hello, Ian Collins. How are you, my darling?
We spotted that out there.
Yeah, I hadn't, because normally sort of like, I look down the camera, so I don't really get to glance at the screen. Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. Maybe we're going to go to some sort of like French reunion or something, or some garlic around.
It could be that,
yeah,
or Chagos reunion, maybe.
Chagos reunion, yeah. I'm guessing you're going to be talking about that one.
Well, I'm going there on holiday in a couple of weeks. No, I'm not. So yeah, I'm pretty annoyed about this deal. Actually, it's going to make things much more expensive.
Do you know, I've got one of my big themes today, because when I look at the relationship that the Labour Party have with China, it's really
I heard you
weird.
say this earlier.
I don't think enough people are talking about this. The amount of ministers who've been flown out to Beijing when for such a long time we've been told that China is a threat to our national security.
Yeah.
America's saying, hey, wake up. Britain, they've put kill switches in our solar panels, they can do the same to you. But when you count how many ministers have been flown out there in just a year, something funny's going on. Is it just that they're all commies together?
Do you remember Beijing Baz? Barry Gardner, the MP.
Oh, yeah.
To be fair to Mr. Gardner, I have to say this, he did nothing wrong, but he was, it didn't stop people saying, oh, you've got somebody who's Chinese working for you or something like that. But yeah, when you look at it now, I think it's because the Labour Party don't, the likes of Rachel Reeves, I mean, they are so inept. I mean, the levels of ineptitude are just, they make you giddy when you think about it. There's the lack of experience in any capacity running stuff. So I think they thought, we're going to be really clever here, OK? We're going to get into China, because that's where, like, you buy stuff off Amazon.
Yeah, and it's so cheap, isn't it?
They know things, so we can be their best friend, even though we don't really like them, but we kind of do like them a bit. So I think it's almost as playground as that. I know that
just
sounds a little bit...
completely naive. There's no sort
I think there's a
of
naivety
stitch
to
up.
it, yeah. There seems to be. It doesn't seem to happen with many other... I haven't seen Macron flying out there, or anyone else for that matter.
But to me, it's staggering, because it's intervention from Sir Richard Dearlove in The Independent today, saying this is madness to have Chinese solar panels in Britain when we know they've got kill switches. There was another, the advisor to the government, security advisor to the government, himself has turned round and said foreign countries are basically subverting the British system by pushing net zero policies. And yet, do these security briefings just vaporise as soon as they hit Sir Keir Starmer's desk?
Well, as soon as anything critical of net zero happens, Ed Miliband, literally a limb falls off him every time somebody says something. So he discombobulates. He can't handle the idea. When somebody is so... Which is always the fundamental flaw in left-wing thinking. It's that idea. This is not just a sort of belief that is malleable and open to, persuasion or debate. It's a religion. It's evangelical. He's so wedded to that. That even when they come along and say, we're going to build another runway, he goes, no, it's still going to carry on, everything's going to be tickety-boo, net zero all the way. There's no compromise in that. And if you look at the people advising Miliband, these are all the old Corbynites that are sitting there in his office, which, let's face it, that's where his political allegiance is, isn't it?
Well, his dad was a sort of famous Marxist writer, wasn't he? And
That's
then you've got old Rachel Reeves putting that photo of that communist on the wall of the Treasury, and Sir Keir Starmer, who spent a nice little gap year in a communist workers' camp. I mean,